Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your duke of dope discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your archduke of Banterbury. Actually, it's Archbishop of Banterbury. That's what was hung on me. And of course, your existential Mr. Rogers, Robert Meyer Burnett. And I'm, of course, robcasting at you from the Robservatory. When I do that, I'm thinking about Bill Blazejowski from the great film Night Shift, starring Henry Winkler and, of course, Michael Keaton, directed by Ron Howard. I love Night Shift. I always thought that they should have made a sequel, Day Shift. They probably can't now, but they should have. The sequels I've been waiting for, I'd love a sequel for Night Shift, and I would love to have seen a sequel to Risky Business, Riskier Business. I actually told Tom Cruise that myself once. I did. But that's a story for another day. Ladies and gentlemen, it is gentle beings, kind people from across the 28 known galaxies. This is what a day. There's a lot going on. A lot happening. A lot of news. And just when I thought I was out, Michael Corleone style, Godfather 3. I thought I was Godfather 3. I was Godfather 3. I thought I was going to be out. I thought I was done talking about Star Trek Picard, but oh, lo and behold, I am not. Boy, I've got a bumper crop of letters. I got tons of letters coming in over the transom, and I am trying to get to a lot of them today. But we're just going to just delve right into all kinds of news. And I just also want to point out this very cool thing. There it is, ladies and gentlemen, the box set, the 4K Skywalker Saga, all in one box. That's right. And kudos to Best Buy for just saying you just have to roll up. You email what your vehicle looked like. You roll up, you just park there, and someone comes out, makes you roll up your windows and sets it with the bag, just sets it in your car or in your trunk, wherever you want it. That was pretty cool. So good on Best Buy. I appreciate their customer service. Anyway, now, ladies and gentlemen, I already prepaid for this a long time ago, so I probably shouldn't be buying anything now, because who knows. But this was something that was a long time ago, pre-ordered a long time ago. And Elizabeth's like, you always say that you pre-ordered something a long time ago. Well, in the case of this, yes. Because if you don't jump on those, as anyone knows who gets Best Buy Steelbooks, or if there's something people want, it's hard to get in on that. You got to get it on the ground floor. Every time something that Best Buy puts out that I wanted, Infinity War and Endgame, those Steelbooks. I'm not even a Steelbook fiend. I just wanted those. I would stress out about it. They'd be gone. Anyway, that has nothing to do with anything, and I'm babbling. I am here for you, imagination connoisseurs, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. I don't even think I said what this is. This is Robservations, after all. This is Robservations, episode number 378. My God, 378, coming at you members of the Post-Geek Singularity community. First of all, I want to start off with something right off the top. This is something that dropped today. As everyone knows who loves comic book stores, and we've been talking about the plight of comic book stores on this show, comic book stores are all service. They get all of their comics and toys and action figures and import Japanese action figures, whatever the hell they carry in their stores, they get them from one place. For the most part, they get them from Diamond Distributors. Diamond puts out a giant, big telephone book size catalog every month. Comic book stores are able to order from that catalog, and that's where they get all their stuff from. As everyone knows, Diamond is there's no more distributing of new comic books. They're not accepting new comic books from their vendors. So comic book stores, even our own Comic Relief, are the first official comic book store of the Burnettwork, of Robservations, the show about something. Jacob Fudge's comic book store. What is Jacob doing? Keeping his comic book store alive. He was taking new books to his customers, driving all over 2 states, and taking comic books to people's homes to keep his business going. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Diamond, the company that services all direct sale comic book stores in this country, announced today they warn of cash flow problems of their own, and they have halted all payments to their vendors. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. And this, I got this from Newsarama, and this is Chris Arndt, the editor of Newsarama, published this. Diamond Comic Distributors is holding previously scheduled payments to its vendors this week, attributing their decision to cash flow difficulties due to coronavirus's impact on the supply chain. In a letter from Stan Heidman, the president of Diamond's parent company, Jeppy Family Enterprises, the distributor explains to its vendors that they are no longer receiving consistent payment from their customers, and that as a result, they will hold payments to vendors previously scheduled to release this week. Meaning, comic book stores are closed, and Diamond is not giving them comic books, so the comic book stores can't pay Diamond because they're not getting their stuff anyway. So Diamond is saying to their vendors, the people that give them everything, such as comics or toys or whatever the heck you're going to buy at your comic book store, Diamond is now saying to those vendors, sorry, our customers can't pay, so we're not going to pay you. And you're seeing the domino effect, the result of something that's directly happening to the imagination connoisseur economy. But I think a company like Diamond should have had a little bit more of a cushion to be able to pay their vendors in times of need, because this is the kind of collapsing effect that, drives everyone into a Great Depression. But anyway, for the layman, Diamond's customers are direct market or specialty comic book shops, mail order services, bookstores, and other retail operations who buy discounted products from the distributor to sell to their customers. Vendors are the comic book publishers and manufacturers of games, toys, collectibles, etc., who depend on Diamond to distribute those products to retail stores. Here's the full letter from the Jeppy Family Enterprises president, Stan Heidman. Dear Diamond vendor, as the world responds to the outbreak of COVID-19, our focus is on protecting employees, understanding the risks to our business, evaluating the risks to our industry, and examining the federal government resources available. While the full impact of this epidemic is still unknown, one thing is certain: supply chain disruptions have cash flow implications across the extended industry that cannot be underestimated. While we work to understand the current industry landscape, the unfortunate truth is that we are no longer receiving consistent payment from our customers. This requires that at this time we hold payments to vendors previously scheduled to release this week. This is a difficult decision and not one we make lightly. As this decision continues to evolve, we are committed to building out a plan for payment and have more information to share later this week. Thank you for your patience and understanding these difficult times. Look, it's tough all over. I totally agree. I totally agree. But I wanted to bring this up because this whole disruption in the direct sale market, beginning with distributors like Diamond, it begins and ends with them as distributors for both vendors and for their customers. And I think it was sort of disheartening to read that they, immediately are going to start blaming their customers for the reason they can't pay their vendors, when really it's kind of like it's like a casino. While I personally wish I could operate this way too, but if you have players on the floor, you need enough in reserves to cover your what you've got out there. So a casino can only have as many people in the door and playing as you can cover their bets. And I think it's disheartening to read that Diamond so quickly was put in this position. I feel bad for them. I feel bad for their vendors. But most of all, I feel bad for our comic book store proprietors who, let's face it, as we've talked about on the show before, they do comic book store. They became direct sale comic book store owners because they love the medium. They love the marketplace. And it's not, as we all know, it's not a business. You don't open a comic book store or collectible store to really get rich. I mean, you want to make a living, surely, but you do it, really, it is a job. It's a fan's job. It's a job that's done out of love. And I feel for all of my comic book store owners and proprietors out there. I also feel for I feel for everybody. but this was disheartening to read. And it makes me sad. So everybody is being affected by this, and we are going to deal with the ripples and the ramifications of what's going on for our industry, for all the industries that service we imagination connoisseurs, whether it's movie theaters, whether it's comic book stores, whether it's action figure companies like Sideshow or Hot Toys. I mean, I hope that, I know that certain shipments have been delayed when it comes to Sideshow, and they make their own stuff, but I have to tell you, I was thinking about this today, and you might notice right behind me there, I opened a clone trooper, an Utapau trooper. I bought this figure probably, 10 years ago. I never opened it, but somebody mentioned to me in a chat that they liked this was a collaborative figure between Hot Toys and Sideshow. Again, it's like a figure that's at least 10 years old. It's a Clone Wars Obi-Wan figure where Obi-Wan is wearing Stormtrooper armor, and I figured, you know what? I've been moving stuff around, and this Utapau trooper was made by Sideshow. I never opened it. As a matter of fact, I probably have like 10 different clone troopers I've never opened, but I just decided to open this today because I'm home, and it's always fun to unbox and open toys. I did say I was going to do it on Twitter, and I did it. That Utapau trooper is one great figure, and now maybe I'll open the Anakin, and Obi-Wan and Anakin will have a whole cadre of different clone troopers behind them before General Order 66 was given. Who knows? I'm rambling. There's a lot I want to get into, and I hate to say it, I got pulled back into Star Trek. I got pulled back in. I wanted to stay out, but they pulled me back in. Deep breath. So, and again, I have a lot of letters, but what I want to start with is a little bit of a timeline. Now, I want to get in here, and I want to read an article. It's all, once again, I go back to my beloved Hollywood Reporter to find out things, And one of the things I want to read, this one is from January 9th, 2019. January 9th, 2019. So, what is that, 13 months ago? This article, Yiddish Policemen's Union alt history drama set, from Michael Chabon and Eilert Wildman, his lovely wife, Pat Ma, Keshet, and CBS Studios. What if Alaska's home of a big Jewish settlement and the fledgling state of Israel was destroyed? That's the setup of a TV series project based on Michael Chabon's acclaimed 2007 alternative history book, Yiddish Policemen's Union. By the way, a great book, and I loved it. CBS TV Studios, Nina Tassler and Denise DeNovi's Pat Ma Productions, and Keshet Studios have acquired a spec drama script by the husband and wife writing duo Chabon and Eilert Waldman. The project will be taken out shortly to the premium cable and streaming networks. Based on Chabon's novel and developed for television by Chabon and Waldman, The Yiddish Policemen's Union is a darkly comic murder mystery and political thriller. In Chabon's alternative history, Jewish refugees from Hitler's Europe found unlikely refuge in the Alaskan Panhandle. In the present day of this world, as the community faces yet another exile, homicide detective Meyer Landsman must overcome the shambles of his broken life and marriage and solve a mysterious murder with profound political and religious ramifications. Chabon and Waldman executive produced with Pat Moss, Tesler, and DeNovi, along with Peter Tregut, and Rachel Kaplan for Keshet Studios and Jonathan Levin. The project is a co-production of CBS TV Studios, Pat Ma, and Keshet Studios. They're going to make this for Showtime. Now remember, that was on January 9th, 2019. Now I'd like to jump forward. Let's jump forward in time to January 12th, 2020, a little over a year later. That was this year, and Leslie Goldberg wrote this article for the Hollywood Reporter. Star Trek Picard renewed for Season 2 at CBS All Access. 12 Monkeys co-creator and alum Terry Matalas has also boarded the series and will help fill the void created by Michael Chabon's planned departure for Season 2. Sources also note producers have been given an informal green light to begin work on Season 3 of Picard. Star Trek Picard is officially charting its course for seasons 2 and 3. Ahead of its January 23rd series debut, CBS All Access announced Sunday during its time at the Television Critics Association Winter Press Tour that it has officially renewed the Patrick Stewart-led drama for season 2. Sources say the show has also received early orders to begin work on season 3, which will likely be filmed back-to-back with the sophomore season, with the production hiatus not very brief between production cycles. Makes sense. CBS All Access and CBS Studios declined to comment on the status of season 3 of Picard. The streamer only confirmed the season 2 renewal during its time at TCA. The energy, excitement around the premiere of Star Trek Picard has reached a magnitude greater than all of us at CBS All Access could have hoped for, said Julie McNamara, Executive Vice President of Originals at CBS All Access. Yes, she said this before the show debuted. We're thrilled to announce plans for a second season before the series debut, and we are confident that Star Trek fans and new viewers alike will be captured by the stellar cast and creative team's meticulously crafted story when it premieres on January 23rd. Additionally, 12 Monkeys alum Terry Matalas has boarded Picard as an executive producer and has also signed an overall deal with CBS Studios. Sources note that the studio pulled him off of its MacGyver reboot at CBS to join Picard, which is a high priority for the studio. Interesting. Terry Matalas, who goes all the way back to working with Brandon Braga on Enterprise, pulled off MacGyver to be on Picard, and CBS signed an overall deal with Terry Matalas. It's a big deal. Matalas, sources say, will take over as showrunner in season 2 and help fill the void created by Michael Chabon's planned departure. A release announcing the renewal referred to Matalas only as an executive producer, though. Sources say he is the likely eventual showrunner. Chabon and his wife, author Eilette Waldman, inked an overall deal with Picard producers CBS Studios and are adapting the former's Pulitzer Prize-winning, is it Pulitzer? I guess it's not Pew, it's Pulitzer Prize-winning novel, The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, as a limited series for corporate sibling Showtime. Now, that is different than the Yiddish Policeman's Union. So now we've heard 2 different Michael Chabon adaptations of his own work are going. One was being shot by CBS a year ago, and now apparently The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, which is basically the story of Siegel and Schuster, is being made for Showtime. As part of that deal, Chabon will transition to the new series and exit Picard this year. Production on season 1 of Picard has been completed, and a writer's room for seasons 2 and 3, which will be filmed back-to-back in a bid to control costs and everyone's production schedules, has been up and running for some time now. And we know certain other people that we're excited about, like Mark Bernardin, have been hired to be a consulting producer for Star Trek, presumably to be in the writer's room. Whether that's for season 2 or 3 remains to be seen. Chabon will remain as showrunner on Picard before passing the baton to Matalas, who has been working on the highly anticipated show for some time. Helping to ease the transition is the fact that Star Trek franchise captain Alex Kurtzman also exec produces Cavalier and Clay alongside fellow Picard exec producer Akiva Goldsman. So Akiva Goldsman, Alex Kurtzman, and Michael Chabon are transitioning over to doing, of course, The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. Also, Alex Kurtzman is developing the new Clarice series based on, of course, Thomas Harris's novels. It's worth noting that Picard was informally renewed for a second season in December when the series earned a $20 million tax credit from the California Film Commission. It was one of 16 projects to receive credits for basing its production in the state. Season 1 also received tax credits. Picard is one of multiple Star Trek shows that serve as the franchise cornerstone of CBS All Access, the subscription platform that has Star Trek Discovery and the animated comedy Star Trek Lower Decks, and is at work on a Michelle Yeoh-led spinoff of the former. So there you go. That brings us up to date there. Now I want to jump over to... Actually, I missed one. I was going to read this, but this is all... Let me go backwards in time. June 27th, 2019, so June 27th of last year. This was after the Secret Policemen's Union was announced, and Michael Chabon was named showrunner of CBS All Access series, named as the showrunner for Picard on June 27th, 2019. Sorry, didn't mean to go back and I didn't mean to jerk you around the timeline. I'm really so delighted, and I can't believe I get a chance to be a part of this. Pulitzer Prize-winning author Michael Chabon told Deadline last fall about joining the writer's room of CBS All Access. The lifelong Star Trek fan has now been named showrunner of the Star Trek revival that is bringing Trek icon Patrick Stewart back into Federation space. Chabon, who had been part of a core creative team on the series, is working closely on the day-to-day production with fellow executive producers, veteran Star Trek writer-producer Akiva Goldsman, and Alex Kurtzman, who continues to oversee the expansion of the growing Trek universe. Daring, lyrical, humane, whimsical, celebrated, words that describe both Jean-Luc Picard and the literary genius of Michael Chabon, said Kurtzman. Despite a laundry list of accomplishments most writers only dream of, Michael shines with the heart and soul of a Trekkie who's finally found his dream job. We're so fortunate to have him at the helm as we explore the next chapter in the great captain's life. Star Trek has been an important part of my way of thinking about the world, the future, human nature, storytelling, and myself since I was 10 years old, said Chabon. I come to work every day in a state of joy and awe at having been entrusted with this chapter and the world of Jean-Luc Picard, with this vibrant strand of the rich, intricate, and complex tapestry that is Star Trek. Chabon is best-selling Pulitzer Prize-winning author of the novels The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, Moonglow, Wonder Boys, yes, that Wonder Boys that was adapted into that movie, which was a great movie, by the way, and the Yiddish Policeman's Union, among others. His screenplays and teleplays include John Carter's Spider-Man 2, Unbelievable, which he wrote with his writing partner and wife, Alec Wildman. By the way, I liked Unbelievable quite a bit, I must say, as well as the Star Trek Short Treks episode Calypso. In addition to the Pulitzer Prize, Chabon has won the Hugo, Nebula, Mythopoeic, Sideways, and I can't pronounce this. Ignatius. Star Trek Picard will air exclusively on CBS All Access. So there you go. But now we come to what I really wanted to read today. This article that was in the Hollywood Reporter 2 days ago that somehow I didn't read until now. But we're going to read it. March 29th, 2020. Phil Perello. The Challenge for Star Trek Picard Season 2. Showrunner Michael Chabon and executive producer Akiva Goldsman reflect on the big swing they took with the finale and look forward to what's next. It's never going to be just a show about the crew of a starship that's part of Starfleet. As this article says, there's going to be spoilers. The plan to bring Patrick Stewart's iconic Star Trek The Next Generation captain back to the small screen for the first time since 1994 was always intended to boldly go where the Season 1 finale took it, with Picard's sacrifice and resurrection. How is a sacrifice followed by a resurrection? I mean, notwithstanding Easter, but, how exactly to use the show's first season to get there was less than clear, but the chance to resolve Picard's arc this way was worth the complex creative journey. What sacrifice did Picard make? Anyway, we didn't decide to do this to the character from place of we didn't want to have future seasons or anything like that, Chabon tells the Hollywood Reporter in a post-mortem discussion about the first season's conclusion. From the original plan for the show, even though our original outline changed significantly to what you eventually saw, the plan, and Sir Patrick Stewart's plan from the beginning, was let's tell more stories with Picard. In January, Picard executive producer Alex Kurtzman told the Hollywood Reporter that none of their original pitch document for the first season made it to the shooting of the final project. None. So the show that they actually pitched to Patrick Stewart, none of it made it to the final project. That story document, written by Chabon, Kurtzman, and Goldsman, what about Kirsten Beyer? Also didn't feature Data, a character whose death in 2002's Nemesis would eventually end up playing a vital role in Picard's post-Captain of the Enterprise life. As the story was evolving, what stayed constant, other than the titular character, was embracing the narrative's potential to unfold in a very peak TV, binge-friendly way. You really have to binge watch the whole thing in 10 episodes, Chabon says, and it's a tricky thing because the whole episodic versus serialized nature way we watch things and how especially Star Trek audiences are sort of trained to expect more of that episodic mission of the week structure, and that's not what the show is. Well, I would dare say if you watch the third season of Enterprise, which was entirely one story, completely episodic, completely serialized, or you watched, I don't know, the latter 3 seasons of Deep Space Nine, I think Star Trek audiences and fans, some of the most intelligent fans who have ever watched television, are very astute and know how to watch serialized programming. I'm also sure that Star Trek fans were some of the first people to watch shows like, The Wire, The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, because the people that watch Star Trek are fans of, X-Files, Babylon 5. Anyway, Chabon believes Star Trek Discovery's emphasis on serialized storytelling helped prime the pump for audiences' experiences with Picard's more novelistic narrative approach, specifically when it came to ending the retired Starfleet officer's life opposite his long-lost android friend? Really? So Star Trek Discovery primed the pump so Star Trek fans would be educated enough to be able to understand serialized storytelling as opposed to, the episodic storytelling that began in 1966? Like Star Trek fans had never watched any other show? Ever? This was one of the great organizing ideas of the season, the final sit-down between Picard and Data. Okay, how could it be one of the great organizing ideas of the season if your original pitch for the show didn't include Data in it? Goldsman adds, this idea of how Picard could face and take off the anchors of his own guilt surrounding the loss of his friend. The loss of his friend, his own guilt. They were facing an extinction event. Data self-sacrificed. Picard would not have guilt about this. Picard before he was captain of the Enterprise, he was captain of the Stargazer. He doesn't carry around that kind of guilt. The guilt he might carry around is, yes, what he did is Locutus, but that was imposed on him. Data self-sacrificed. He was a Sung android. But anyway, this idea of how Picard could face and take off the anchors of his own guilt surrounding the loss of his friend was part of what we were driving to from the beginning. Akiva Goldsman in that statement shows that he has very little understanding of what Star Trek is all about. Especially, if you're out on the final frontier, you're a captain of a ship, especially you've been captain of a ship for decades. Losing a crewman is part of that. And Data wasn't even a human being. He was a Sung android who chose to do what he did. It wasn't like Picard sent him to his death. But anyway, I listen to these people talk about Star Trek and I just, To get there, the thematic tentpole the writers used early on was the dream Picard has about Data, where they're all back on the Enterprise D at 10 Forward. As things changed about the series and the season as it evolved, Goldman explains, this dream and Picard's fate never changed. Okay, there you go. What did change were plans for how and when events would unfold in the early episodes of the season. For instance, the original plan was for Picard to assemble his new crew aboard the La Serena vessel by the end of episode 2. In the final season, Picard doesn't venture back into space until the end of episode 3, but budget and story needs allowed the writers to expand upon that critical plot development and treat the first 3 episodes as though they were akin to the 3-act structure of a feature film. From there, certain character details began to come into focus, especially in regards to teaming Picard with Star Trek Voyager's 7 of 9, something I am sure Kirsten Meyer came up with herself. The idea of bringing 7 back and seeing her Borg past interact with Picard's, it was just too rich to pass up, Chabon says. Did we see her Borg past interact with Picard's? I mean, if you wanted to bring 7 of 9 in, shouldn't she been a part of the show from the very beginning? It was just too rich to pass up, Chabon says. 7 is a character both Chabon and Goldsman wish they could have spent more time with, especially upon seeing 7 hold Raffi's hand, a beat Ryan and Michelle Hurd improvised on the shooting day. While the scene is brief, the season did subtly set up the two characters' developing relationship. I would say that's a pretty big thing to allow characters to improvise, but okay. If you sit down and rewatch you'd see a hint or two here and there throughout the season of Seven and Raffi just getting to know each other, Chabon says. The first hint of it is in the first episode Seven appears in on Free Cloud. As Raffi is putting handcuffs on Seven, there's a moment between them, a physical gesture. And in that moment, I think, is where you start to feel some kind of a connection. Really? Really? As they're preparing to don costumes and go into a situation where apparently Seven is going to go confront her former lover, you think Seven's thinking about Raffi during all this? Okay. Chabon instantly connected with the responsibility of writing what is the season's most emotional scene, Picard and Data's farewell. That was a big challenge for me, Chabon says, writing it as a long scene and knowing it was going to be an important scene. It was just Patrick and Brent. I really wanted it to be great for them. I would ask Michael Chabon, when you think about Patrick Stewart and Data, I don't think it's a real stretch after 178 episodes to understand that when you put Brent Spiner and Patrick Stewart in a room together, they don't really have a hard time delivering good performances. Chabon's other main concern was to avoid the scene feeling like they were milking it for melodrama or too much pathos, as is often the case in lesser hands when two characters of this status meet. Two characters of this status meet. You're going to put Data and Picard together and, oh my God, milking it for too much melodrama and pathos? We've only ever seen these characters together for 178 episodes and 4 feature films. Another memorable reunion of classic Trek characters happened for Goldsman when Picard sees Will Riker and his wife Deanna Troi again, the first time all 3 actors have appeared in Trek together since Nemesis. When Jonathan and Marina landed on set, Goldsman recalls, it was sort of one of those moments where you felt lucky to be a part of it. Sure, but that wasn't even a part of your original conception of the show. That happened later, according to Jonathan Frakes. Both Chabon and Goldsman are currently at work shaping the story for Star Trek Picard's upcoming 2nd season. Is Terry Matalas involved in that? Which finds Picard and his new body and his new crew set to explore the final frontier once again in ways that Chabon promises will honor that which the first season started, telling Star Trek in familiar but new and emotionally challenging ways. Okay? New. And that's the challenge, Chabon says. First, it's got to be good, right? And it has to be focused on Picard, but have room for all the other characters, as if this is something that has never been done before on Star Trek. It's never going to be just a show about the crew of a starship that's part of Starfleet, and everyone's wearing uniforms and they're flying around, encountering alien life and weird planets. Those are the challenges we face going into Season 2, and I'm so excited about the story we've come up with. So it's about the crew of a starship that's not part of Starfleet, and everyone's wearing civilian clothes, and they're flying around and encountering alien life and weird planets? For more from the Picard finale, check out the Hollywood Reporter's Postmortem with Stewart, the Star Trek Easter eggs you may have missed, and thoughts on where Season 2 will go. Here's something that I don't think can be stressed enough. When Star Trek The Next Generation began, it was Gene Roddenberry overseeing that show. Gene Roddenberry first brought in people like Rick Sternbach and Mike Okuda to start designing. He brought back Dorothy Fontana and David Gerrold, who were there developing the show with him. Rick Berman also came over from the studio. And for 25 seasons of Star Trek, Rick Berman, who had actually worked with Gene Roddenberry, he was pretty rigid in what he wanted from Star Trek, but Rick Berman came from working with Roddenberry. He knew what the creator of the franchise wanted, and while he might have been very rigid about it, did everything he could to support his vision of Gene's vision of Star Trek and what his vision of Star Trek entailed. In 1991, Gene passed away, but Rick Berman kept on soldiering on for 14 years beyond Roddenberry's death. And having worked with Roddenberry, Star Trek continued on 18 years, a total of 18 years and 25 seasons of Star Trek. And whether you like Enterprise, whether you like Voyager, whether you like Deep Space Nine, whether you like the original series, Next Generation, and of course the original series, there was the DNA of what Roddenberry wanted in all of the Berman era of Trek. And that's why it endured. And while I was critical, I was heavily critical of Voyager when it first came on the air, that it was a copy of a copy of a copy. You had to have a half human, half alien crew member in B'Elanna Torres. You had the holographic doctor, which was sort of a variation on Data, who was also a variation on Pinocchio, a boy that desperately wanted to be real, a mechanical boy that wanted to be real. It's an old story. That's why Stanley Kubrick developed AI, which Spielberg later directed, because he was fascinated by that story. And what I found really interesting is that if you're going to do a show, and I'll flat out say this, Star Trek Picard in every episode had great ideas in it. Any one of those ideas could have been explored and turned into a series. And what I find very, very interesting is if you think about the fact that let's talk about synthetic life first, which harks all the way back to Data's quest to be human all throughout Next Generation, but specifically the episode of Measure of a Man where they introduced the character of Bruce Maddox, which is, again, probably a Kirsten Beyer thing, but, I can't speak to that necessarily. I don't know. But I would ask you, from a storytelling standpoint, Mr. Pulitzer, Hugo and Nebula winner, and Academy Award winner, Akiva Goldsman won the Academy Award, and you've got a Pulitzer, a Hugo, and a Nebula over there with Michael Chabon. Why was Bruce Maddox in this show? Why were you going to get him? What purpose did he serve? Did he illuminate any of your plot? And yet, the first 4 episodes, almost half your series, dealt with going to get the character of Bruce Maddox. Why? I mean, what did we learn from this character? And what's really interesting is you go all the way back to Measure of a Man where Bruce Maddox was introduced, and this idea that he says, I want a Data on every starship in Starfleet. That's an interesting idea. But, as we've seen with holographic doctors, Data is an artificial intelligence that is made ambulatory by being put into a human body, an anthropomorphized human body. I mean, you could have given him wheels. You could have done anything you wanted to him, but the character of Data was created as a mechanical man, which goes back far, far back into science fiction history. And his quest to be human is helped by the fact that he looks human. He's been made to look human. But the idea of synthetic life doesn't have to be human. There is a muddled idea in Star Trek that was never really dealt with of what synthetic life actually is. Because when you say synthetic life, if you're a robot, if you're mechanical, there was nothing biological about Data. Nothing. Nothing at all. So he's not life. He's an android. And so from the very beginning, the producers, Michael Chabon and Akiva Goldsman and Kirsten Beyer and Alex Kurtzman, failed to help the audience understand, how do you define synthetic life? The entire series is dependent upon that idea. What is it? If you're creating machines, why are only machines that look like people called synths? Because they have self-determination, because they can think on their own. As we know with Data, you could just turn him off. You literally could turn Data off. So if there's a problem with synthetic life, just turn it off. But I don't think real synthetic life, like what they were really thinking it is, you could turn synthetic life off. Because if you did, you would be murdering or retiring. That's why Blade Runner is what it is. The idea, it wasn't called murder, it was called retirement. It was semantics. The replicants in Blade Runner were biological life. Yes, they were constructed, but they were actually synthetic life. In the Battlestar Galactica universe, Cylons could procreate with human beings, which means they're also, well, I guess you'd call them synthetic life. But nowhere from anything that we've seen in the Star Trek universe did we actually have real synthetic life. Basically, you're talking about a machine uprising like Skynet. Nobody would ever mistake Terminators for being synthetic life. They are machines. Sure, they get covered with human flesh so they can go back in time, but they're not synthetic life. So as I read all of this, and at the end of the show, Captain Picard dies of his brain ailment, and then they transfer his brain patterns. They basically digitize him and put him into this golem, this machine golem, which is, goes back to Yiddish folktales, Yiddish history, all of that. But Picard, make no mistake, dies. He died. He's dead. Captain Picard died. Now they've made a machine that utilizes, however, his consciousness or whatever. But the question I have, I don't think they even know the answer to this. Is their Picard golem supposed to be synthetic life? Or is it just a machine? It's a machine. And we saw that whatever their synth god that's way out there in the multiverse or the galaxies, you can open portals, why these creatures just don't go from galaxy to galaxy and destroy all biological life anyway. If you can open up a portal, like I said before, and come through, they certainly can open up a portal and come through. So why, they're just waiting for biological life to reach a certain point where they build more synths? They've never defined any of this in the show. And with all of these things, I don't understand why that the whole idea of Picard becoming this at the end, he would literally be the savior. If they wanted to follow what they're trying to set up, Picard, in becoming a synth himself, would become the savior and would be able to bridge the gap. Although I guess that would mean Picard now should be bringing in his synthetic overlords from the other galaxies to come in. I read this stuff. And first of all, we as fans are being told by the current runners of Star Trek that we don't understand serialized storytelling. I would say it's been my experience since I was a very young boy that Star Trek fans are the most astute and some of the most intelligent audience members any TV show can have. So to say that, Star Trek Discovery, like we've had no serialized storytelling in the Star Trek universe, I'm like, what planet are you on? Have you not been paying attention, over the last 50 years, maybe since the first Star Trek invention happened in 1972? Who are the first people to embrace these kinds of things? I mean, I was a home theater aficionado when I was a kid because I embraced new technology, because I watched Star Trek. And this idea that it's almost like I find these excuses about this show maddening. And when I people always say, see, Rob, Mark Chure is like, see, you've just joined the Phantom Menace. See, I'm not there yet. But it is very, very frustrating to listen to people who I admire. Well, I admire Michael Chabon and I like the Secret Policeman's Union, and I really like The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, two shows that CBS are supposedly developing. But now Michael Chabon doesn't sound like he's going anywhere. Perhaps those other shows aren't going anywhere either. And having read the Clarice pilot, I don't think that show's got much of a future either. But that's just me. I look at this stuff and I'm in awe and wonder, because what I really think is the great failing of this show is none of these science fiction concepts are thought through. And again, the idea of synthetic life isn't really synthetic life. They're basically talking about machines, like anthropomorphized machines. That's not life. Those are machines. Just because you make a machine in the shape of a human being doesn't mean that they're at all human beings. They're machines. Even Dune, when the Butlerian Jihad, in Dune, there was a synth revolt. There was a huge war, basically, and it was decided that no machines would ever be built to resemble the human mind. Not human beings in body, but the human mind, which is what AI is, and hopefully better. And that makes a lot of sense. They really defined it in Dune. So with Dune, the reason people love Dune so much is because of the world building. In this show, they have all kinds of gobbledygook that doesn't make any sense. And, to go further, the great John Price. Here, let me get to this because I forgot to. He's a man I met via social media. He has a post. And let me see if I can find it because I wanted to read it. Johnny Price. And here it is. And I'm going to see if I can see what he wrote a piece today. John Price has been reviewing Star Trek. He's a big Star Trek fan. He's also written, it hasn't been published yet, but a whole thing on Star Trek fandom, fan films, and Axanar that I actually read, which is outstanding. And I'd like to share his piece with you. I published it today. John E. Price on Medium. 5 things I didn't like about Star Trek Picard. This is a difficult one to write because I can't just go the entire premise and execution and every creative choice. Clearly, I wasn't in the writer's room, and this isn't a show I would have written. A lot of people get caught up in this mode of thinking, that's not the show I wanted, especially with Star Trek, because every single Trekkie has their entire life to imagine the show they would make. By the way, for me, too, I have too, but I don't dislike Picard. Everyone comes after me and goes, hey, you feel guilty, you're just mad at CBS or Exner or whatever. No, I'm not. I've never been in a position to work on any television show other than I directed episodes of Femme Fatales, but I certainly haven't developed a show or worked in the writer's room. Not yet. So there's no possibility I ever would have worked on Star Trek Picard. And the level of television directors they're hiring are way above my pay grade. I'd have to work my way up and direct, 20 episodes of a network show or something else a little bit more prestigious than Femme Fatales. Not that I don't appreciate the work I did on the show, because I do. I don't apologize for any work I do. And whatever I work on, I try and make it to the best of my ability. But it's not the show I would have wanted, especially with Star Trek, because every single Trekkie has had their entire life to imagine the show they would make. For example, I would write The Adventures of Captain Jack Pierce and the Quest for Bettering Humanity. Kurtzman and Chabon wrote The Adventures of J.L. Magoo and his one true love, Data. To each their own. It's not fair to say this show isn't what I wanted. Instead, let's single out individual things that ruined the show as written. Number 1, the entire premise and the execution in every creative choice. What was the point of Star Trek Picard? I know what Kurtzman thought the point was, a brutal body horror and super cool death scene. I know what the special effects theme thought the point was, holograms. I know what the actors thought the point was, money. But the story as finished? What was the point? Was it about the Romulan refugee crisis? No. Was it about the September 11th false flag operation? No. Was it about the Zotvosh hating androids? Sorta. Was it about the Seb Chenab the Destroyer? No. Was it about the Irish Tal Shiar housekeepers? God, I wish. It certainly wasn't about Picard himself. No, Star Trek Picard had 24 too many plots, subplots, characters, backstories, and narrative tangents. All the new Trek fans love to talk about how 8 to 13 episode streaming shows are modern storytelling. That's a dumb point of view, but even if it is true, just because something is 10 episodes and behind a paywall doesn't mean it's good or executed well. The first 4 or 5 episodes should have been a 1-hour episode, or 2 one-hour episodes. The final 4 episodes should have been spread over 10 episodes to actually deal with all the subplots they ignored. At the very least, the whole thing needed to be re-edited. Number 2, Raffi. This has nothing to do with Michelle Hurd. The critiques of characters are never critiques of the actors. Toxic new Trek gatekeepers love to equate character criticism with personal attacks, which is a reflection on their own ignorance, but I digress. Back on topic, Raffi was the worst. From JL to the disgustingly offensive welfare queen stereotyping that would give Reagan's casket a boner, Raffi dragged down the entire show. I get it. You're trying to show Picard has skeletons in his closet and demons in his past, and Raffi is the personification of both. I really do get it. It's just terrible. The way the character is introduced is wrong. There's no poverty on Earth. The way the character relates to Picard is frustratingly insufficiently explained. Picard resigned, so she got fired from Starfleet? Okay, fired is colloquial. She meant forced to resign and or discharged? Okay, fine. Still, why? Wouldn't she instead be shipped off to the Starfleet equivalent of duty in Alaska? And then Picard could track her down and she could risk her career again by helping him again, and there'd be a narrative through line with actual consequences. Laugh out loud, sorry, I got caught up writing a story arc, which isn't relevant here. Oh, and remember when they included an entire scene where Raffi visited her estranged son at a space hospital, and they had an emotional moment that might have resonated with the audience if we didn't feel the exact same way as the son? Raffi is crazy. She is a drug addict. She is untrustworthy. I, for one, am shocked her son didn't want him back in his life. Anyway, Raffi sucks, but still totally salvageable. Competent writing and character development can turn this around, but right now, her character sucks. 3. The ships. Yes, I'm going there. The La Serena, atrociously ugly. The Mars September 11th ships, atrociously ugly and lazy. The Romulan ships, ugly. The use of Discovery shuttles, lazy. The Curiosity class, meh. The copy and paste Starfleet, disgustingly lazy. Come on, I know you guys work with Star Trek Online. Just use their ships. They understand Star Trek a lot more than anyone working on CBS Trek right now. It's not even close. The holo controls on the La Serena are straight out of The Expanse, or even Minority Report. Like, it's not even pretending to be original. They even do the hand wave information onto the next screen thing. In a show that is shockingly lazy in its props and visuals, the ships really stand out. This is Star Trek. You have to use stardates and captain's logs, and you have to have cool spaceships. This isn't rocket science. Elnor, number 4. Here's the thing. I like the idea of old man Picard having to come to terms with being a father figure to a kid he selfishly abandoned, but going to Comic-Con and kidnapping a Legolas cosplayer was a weird choice. Why does he use a sword? Why doesn't he use a 20th century sword? Maybe it glows and... Oh, wait, never mind. What is it with these people and wanting to turn Star Trek into Star Wars? Do these people order a Coke and then piss in it, trying to make it a Pepsi? Come on, man. Anyway, Elnor sucked because he was a completely pointless character that had no influence on the story. Shit, Picard didn't even know he was alive for like 4 episodes. 5. The entire resolution. Why was the synth planet a beautiful, clear-skied paradise when Soji said it was a gas planet with red lightning or whatever? Since when does Sung have a biological kid? Why does Kama Sutra's makeup look like it does? Why does the La Serena crew trust Narek? How do they even know who Narek is? Why does the Borg cube remain intact when it crashes into the planet? Why isn't everyone on board dead? Why does O stop her attack? Why do they have 5 planet destruction protocols? How does Riker get called into service and lead his fleet so quickly? Why was Data being kept alive in a USB drive? Why wasn't Data's half-brain put into the golem? Did Picard ever tell Data about his own daughters, quote-unquote? Did the idea that they were his daughters ever become relevant at all? What did they do to Picard's body? Why did they include a scene where Rios and Seven bond over whiskey, and then they cut to Raffi and Seven touching hands, as if they don't understand writing character development? Why was a show called Picard when he was a background character through most of the series? Why was Data's hairline wrong? Why was the synth beast just mechanical tentacles? Why did Rios have a hollow soccer ball that could easily come apart? Why did the La Serena have an Eddie Van Halen paint job? Why wasn't it Admiral fucking Hubris leading the fleet? It was, as we know, she was actually leading the fleet. She had a whole scene with them standing down, and they decided to replace her with Riker at the last minute. Just so you know. Why was it necessary to brutally murder Icheb and Hugh if Seven's character arc began as Space Lorenzo Lamas and ended as Space Lorenzo Lamas? Why did Girardi murder Maddox when nobody knew for like 2 episodes and it didn't matter to anyone when they found out? Why is Maddox even in the show at all? Why did the androids use space flowers for planetary defense? Why does the show called Androids Synths? Is Mars still on fire? That would suck. And for the coup de grace, I turn to a former member of the Post-Geek Singularity in this community, Larry Young. I just don't understand. Somebody thought it was a good idea that the singular character that embodies the human adventure is just beginning was never once the motive power in any scene he was in a show titled for him, and then ended up a robot. That's about as opposite from a Star Trek show as you can get. The gatekeepers will still scream, like the infants they are, "Let people like what they like. Just don't watch it. You're a toxic hater." A friend asked me why I watch these shows. I thought about it, because he's right. It may seem like I'm watching for hate's sake. But the truth is, I watch because I hope. I hope because I dream. I dream because I sleep. I sleep because I drink. And I drink because I watch. Live long and prosper. You can find that on John E. Price's Medium page, and I will put a link in the chat right now. Let me put that there. And ultimately, I have to go back to my original thoughts after reading everything. The people that have been in charge of Star Trek, and I've made this point over and over and over again, do not want to be making Star Trek. They don't. They're using Star Trek's legacy because, hey, CBS needs new Star Trek shows, but they're doing everything they can to not make Star Trek. They want to make Star Trek in their image, whatever their image of Star Trek is, but ultimately, whatever they think Star Trek is, and I hear this from Michael Chabon, who, by the way, his books, The Secret Policeman's Union and The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, are far more Star Trekian than what we were just witnessing with Star Trek Picard. But the people that are current stewards of the franchise felt no obligation at all to adhere or keep the basic tenets of Star Trek, whereas Rick Berman did. Having worked with and created Star Trek The Next Generation along with, I mean, he didn't create Next Generation, but he worked with Roddenberry and David Gerrold and Mike Ikuda and Sternbach and D.C. Fontana, and he was there at the beginning when modern Star Trek was forged. Rick Berman was a part of it. And say what you want. I mean, I have certainly had a love-hate relationship with what he did with Star Trek, but after meeting him and interviewing him for quite some time on the Star Trek The Next Generation discs and the Enterprise discs for those documentaries, I came to admire him and understand where he was coming from. And what he was trying to do, what he believed he was doing, was preserving Roddenberry's ethos. He just thought that there was a box. I think what he believed Roddenberry's box was smaller than it really was. And people are, well, Rob, what about Deep Space Nine? It's so antithetical to what Star Trek is. I mean, what do you think about that? Well, here's the thing. It wasn't. You can deal with a wartime situation, and the people remember, you're dealing with the best of the best when you're dealing with Starfleet officers, and they make tough choices. The Dominion War was not something they didn't start that war, but it was imposed upon them by the Gamma Quadrant, and they acted accordingly. And the whole point of Deep Space Nine, the whole point of what it evolved into, was that our Star Trek characters were able to retain their souls while doing what was necessary to do during this amazing galactic conflict. And that is something I always try and explain to people that, well, it's so different. No. What would happen when good people are faced with the unthinkable? That's what Deep Space Nine is all about. And that's why Deep Space Nine is so good. And people are like, well, Cisco he condoned murder and he, in the pale moonlight. No, he didn't. When he says he can live with it, can't he? I can live with it. Maybe he can't. The idea is, no, he really can't live with it. He can live with it now because it was what needed to be done to stop this war. But it was not something he would have chosen to do, and it's not something he's not going to regret later or feel guilt about for the rest of his life. He didn't just go, I can live with it. Click. He's trying to convince himself at the end of that episode that he can. And the whole point is, we don't know if he can, but we know that he made a very, very difficult choice. His choice was to the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. It was a very difficult choice, and maybe you might say it's the most un-Star Trek thing that ever happened in Deep Space Nine, but the point of the matter is he didn't do it without regret, and he didn't do it without horrible recriminations and feeling terrible about it. That was the whole point of the end of that episode. That's why he erases his log. He's talking himself through it. It's already done, but he's trying to keep himself together because he has to, because the galaxy's fate is at stake. That's why Deep Space Nine is a great show, because those characters retained their souls throughout all of it, even though Avery Brooks gave some of his soul away probably in that moment. Anyway, it just I get so irked when I read this stuff. But John Price, love what he had to say. Anyway, I know I've been ranting for an hour. Let's see what you guys have to say. And I got so many letters to read. So let me just jump into, let me put my glasses on here and read what you guys have to say. I'm going to go all the way back to last night because You've Upset Throg sent in a tip last night and said we didn't get to it. Did you know what director Bong Joon-ho went through with Harvey Weinstein for his cut to be released? Some Like It Hot is a great Wilder film. Well, those are two things. Yes, as many people know, Bong Joon-ho, who won the Best Director this year for Parasite, had a battle royale with Harvey Weinstein to retain his cut of the science fiction film Snowpiercer, which is based on a graphic novel, and went through hell. And yeah, and he fought and won. And yes, Some Like It Hot is a great Billy Wilder film, one of my favorites. Billy Wilder, what an amazing filmmaker. Amazing filmmaker. Our man Dieter Bastian, Shiny Bastian, says, Rob, I've had it with waiting on the 4K special edition, and I ordered the German Free Enterprise DVD on eBay. Since you're not getting anything from me buying it, here's at least a tip. We'll get back to you after I've seen it. A video or a letter? Both. But Dieter, I loved your video. I loved your voice. I want to hear that. But you know what you got to tell me, because I believe the German edition of Free Enterprise does not have the American track on it, and it's completely dubbed, and I've heard none of the jokes make any sense. So, Dieter, tell me, did Deutschland ruin my artistic vision? I need to know. Sam O'Neill sent in a super chat and says, fun fact, Bob Saget does the voiceover on How I Met Your Mother as future Ted at the start of every episode. Sam, I think I knew that. I hope all of you knew that too. Willow sent in a tip and says, I found it a bit strange when medieval fantasy shows like Game of Thrones and The Witcher use fuck, since the English word wasn't invented until the late 15th century. Then again, most cultures probably have a variation on the word. Yeah, as we were talking about yesterday about the word fuck being used in Picard, which I just thought was, again, silly. Yes, we're going to make a show edgy, so we're going to show people in bed and say the word fuck and pull people's eyes out of their sockets. On Star Trek. Again, you know, John Campy and I were having a conversation this morning about this very thing. And, you know, Star Trek is not just a show. It's a genre. It's a genre unto itself. And now that we've had multiple Star Trek shows, I think it's important to remember what makes that, and at the very beginning, you have to understand that Star Trek is a family genre. It is a film, or it's a film. Well, films. It has been a film. It's a franchise. It's a property that is meant to be a family franchise. It's meant to be a family franchise. You should be able to watch it with the entire family, multi-generations, kids, mom, dad, grandma, and grandpa should all be able to sit down and watch Star Trek first and foremost. Now, does that mean you can't tell edgy stories? Of course not. But it's the way that you tell them. Can you deal with the massacre of Borgs in a way that doesn't rub your nose in it, but you understand it's happened? Sure. I mean, remember, they showed Roots and Holocaust. Those miniseries were both broadcast on network television. Those shows were important shows that the family could watch together. They were rough, but they were meant to be discussed together because you're never too young to start learning basic human truths. These new iterations of Star Trek are not family viewing. They're just not. And that is why, first and foremost, that is where they have failed out of the gate. Out of the gate. And showing sex, people in bed, and saying fuck, because those things are completely inconsequential to the story that's being told. Why do you have to use those words? You know, a parent you don't want your 8-year-old son to be hearing fuck. At least, I mean, unless you're saying it yourself, you still don't want them to hear that. That's why you have words like frack. Kids can say frack, and you know what? You can giggle knowingly, knowing what it really means, but it's not fuck. But every episode, they wanted to say fuck. To me, that is just the laziest of the lazy. Come up with your own swear words. Make up Romulan slang, make up Romulan words that are curse words or something. Make it fun. Make it amusing for the audience. That's what good writers do. So I think, using fuck in a medieval show, it doesn't necessarily bother me as much. But on Star Trek Picard, that kind of violence and that kind of language does not belong. The word fuck is an R-rated word. Star Trek should be PG at best. And that's not me being I'm a gorehound. I love the most violent sex, bad language, all that stuff. I enjoy that as a consumer, but not for Star Trek. It doesn't belong in Star Trek. You put it in there, immediately you're taken out of it. It's lame. It's lame. So, Willow, you're right about fuck. Maybe the late 15th century. I understand why they put it in there. But in Westeros, it doesn't bother me because it's sort of slightly removed from our own world. But, yeah. Richard sends in a tip and says, it's interesting to note for would-be writers out there in Star Trek Picard is how they literally subcontracted dimensions from Seven. For instance, she was a loner. She also craved company. She was cold, yet exceptionally emotional and much more. These are what dimensions are, and the very substance in which complex characters are built. I find it ironic that the mature series developed by Oscar winners turned her into a hard-ass alcoholic lesbian that I'm sure we've seen everywhere before. Well, that's the thing, Richard. The Seven, people say, well, she's not the Seven we were introduced to in Voyager. Right. This is problematic. Because if you followed Seven for the seasons that she was on Voyager and her relationship, what you've just done is you've turned her into something she wasn't. You've not honored her character. You wanted to make her a hard-drinking lesbian. And so that's what you're going to do. And she, of course, is also a murderer. Let's not bring people to justice. I've had an intimate relationship with you and I've killed you. The thing is that real character development? No, you've got a character that we watched her trying to acclimate to being taken away from the collective and being a human being through her relationships with other human beings on the Voyager. What would happen if that character now came and was trying to make her way in the Federation? That's really interesting. How do you acclimate? What if she found extended members of her family? Aunts, uncles, grandparents, perhaps? What would that have been like when she landed on Earth at the end of Voyager? What would that have been like for her? And wouldn't Hugh have reached out to her and worked on this project? Journey's End sent in a super chat and says, wow, Chabon's justification for Picard getting into space in episode 3. When the hell has the first act of a movie lasted 2.5 hours? I don't know. Midnight's Edge After Dark sent in a super chat and says, hashtag R&B for Trek. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it would be like to... I'll tell you one thing. If I was the showrunner of a Star Trek show, or a showrunner of any show for that matter, I would have a very distinct idea of what that show would be. And I would be able to... Look, I'm a very collaborative artist. I love working with people. That's what I love the most about filmmaking is all of the other people and what they bring to the storyline. My only experience developing a real story for Star Trek was working on the feature film version of Axanar. We had this story that we inherited from Alec Peters, and I worked with Bill Hunt for a year crafting our script, and we weren't ever finished. We tried to honor what he had started, what Alec had started, but we were trying to inject as much Trek into it as we possibly could. And, I'll tell you, you have these long conversations about all these plot points and why characters say this and why they do this. And I just feel that, when Michael Chabon took over, I don't feel that Star Trek Picard was thought out. It was a show that I know Chabon took over halfway through production, but it feels Again, I have said Discovery and Star Trek Picard are two of the worst serialized stories that I think we've seen since television started doing serialized stories. We've been getting a lot of great TV. Ozark season 3 being a great example of that. I mean, Ozark season 3 took one idea, which was what if Marty and Wendy are two protagonists, the husband and wife protagonist team? What if they suddenly found each other? They were at odds with one another. What would happen? And we watched 10 episodes of that theme played out to its logical conclusion and where that led. That was really interesting. This show did not have one central theme. It did not have one idea. And the idea should have really been about synths and fighting for rights and all that. It was all there. The building blocks were all there, but they get caught up. People who are, I guess, don't read science fiction or are only used to media science fiction or whatever, which is strange coming from Michael Chabon, that none of the ideas that are presented, again, as I said, I go back to the beginning. What's a synth? Define it for me. In the Star Trek universe, we've seen different kinds of androids. The Golem android, we saw that that's what Dr. Corby was doing in What Are Little Girls Made Of? In the first season, the first couple episodes of Star Trek. You know, in the first season of Star Trek, and all of Star Trek history, we saw a man that was creating androids so you could live forever. This is not a new idea. And basically, you've now turned Picard into what Roger Corby was doing in the first season of Star Trek in 1966. And you've done it in the most ham-fisted way possible. Anyway, Bob Quall sends in a tip. It says... Wait, just got here. What do you know? Synth talk, Trek synth talk. The burning question is: Rosie the maid bot sentient? I don't know. It's funny, and if she is, she should go on strike and fight for her rights. Stub McShave says one could argue the first time we meet Luke Skywalker in the original Star Wars movie, he's essentially buying stolen slave labor on the black market. The droids are certainly sentient and are self-aware with distinct personalities. Oh, I agree. You know, I think that the droids in Star Wars, but they're still machines, obviously. But yes, they have their own personalities and they can think for themselves. I agree. But, you know, they know the Jawas are junk salesmen and they don't ask, don't tell where we get our stuff, I guess. But yeah, you could make that argument. And they kind of brought that up in Solo. Dirty Nerdy sends in a tip and says, if Chabon and Goldsman want to know how to write good Star Trek, tell them to go and watch Free Enterprise. Well, that's... You know what? Honestly, that's very flattering for you to say, but I have to say that Free Enterprise was sort of cobbled together as well. We had written a script that was totally different. I would never hold up. I'm very proud of Free Enterprise, and where is it here? It's somewhere. I did win an award from the Writers Guild of America as the best new writer at the AFI Film Festival. Mark and I both did. So that's kind of funny. I'm not a member of the WGA, but they did bequeath me with an award one year. Back in 1998, the WGA gave me an award, the Best New Writer Award at the AFI Film Festival. But I wouldn't hold Free Enterprise up. We had written a script that we had to blow apart almost at the 11th hour because of what an actor wanted, what Shatner wanted. And by the way, his ideas were better. They were really good, but we weren't able to sort of bring the script around. I'm still proud of Free Enterprise, don't get me wrong. I think there's a lot of funny stuff in it, but I still think I wish we could have written another draft. Claudius sends in a tip. Uh-oh, man, you're going to make me read French when Elizabeth isn't here. Bonsoir, Robert. Comment allez-vous? Comment allez-vous? How are you? I guess I'm good. Je sais tu detests Picard. You dislike Picard. Yes. I agree this is bad science fiction. Science fiction should be a careful consideration of the technology. Arrival, World War Z, and Contagion do this much better. Yeah, I think Arrival is a great example of a science fiction movie that deals with language. It's amazing. Wes Moody Webcast sends in a super chat and says, do you think Picard can get drunk on synthahol? Well, not anymore. You know, he's a machine. I don't think he needs to drink at all. But you never know. Frieder Helms sent in a super chat and says, Rob, love your take on DS9. So true. Greetings from Germany. Well, if Dieter's watching, I have to say, Frieder, and Frieder, Age of Frieder, there's that great song in the Metropolis, Giorgio Moroder's version of Metropolis, where they talk about Frieder, who's a character, and I love that name. By the way, I have to say, greetings from Deutschland. Because if I didn't, Dieter would get mad. Rob, you didn't say Deutschland. I love it when you say Deutschland. Jet Screamer sends in a super chat and says, do you think Picard will go home and get number one? I don't know what he's going to do. I don't know, like, what is he going to do? Go fly around on the highways and byways of the land like Mentor and Billy Batson in the Shazam Saturday morning series? Like, why would he possibly do that? I mean, now that he's immortal, well, he should be immortal. Like, you get put into a synth body and you're not immortal. Why would you do that? But anyway, I don't know what he's going to do. I guess they have to keep those characters. I mean, I'd love it if they went back and told a whole different story. Jeff Yerkley sends in a super chat. Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate supporting the channel that way. Rob, in these Variety and Hollywood Reporter articles, Chabon and Goldsman are trying to polish the turd. It's revisionist spin they're whipping up. I think so, too. You know, reading or listening to Midnight's Edge shows about... Midnight's Edge did a lot of shows about how licensors did not want to, they couldn't get anyone to do product, like action figures and model kits or whatever. I'm sure Eagle Moss will make the La Serena. But at the end of the day, when I watch this show, I'm like, and look, I'm Mr. Star Trek model. I'm Mr. Eagle Moss. I mean, I love everything. I got a space dock right here. I got spaceship models surrounding me. I love the Enterprise refit from the motion pictures. One of my favorite things ever. There was nothing in the show I wanted to buy. Like there was nothing iconic. It was just people wearing costumes. I mean, there's nothing I wanted. And I'm wondering, like, what could you sell from this show that would look good on a shelf? Like, and that's part of what Star Trek is. It was always the design of things, the uniforms, the color, the ship designs. And they kind of kept that, whether it was a saucer that turned into a spoon and the warp nacelles and all that. There was nothing in this show that I mean, the Rocinante is a more interesting ship than the La Serena. I mean, there was nothing in this show from a Star Trek perspective that you wanted an action figure of. And that was, I think, that was a real problem. No wonder licensees didn't want to make anything from this show. I didn't know whether Midnight's Edge, if, they heard that, would this be bared out? I know Eagle Moss will probably make the La Serena, but there was really nothing of consequence or of note that was worth turning into a toy or a model kit or an action figure, and I thought that was odd, too. I mean, we all know that when the MCU puts out another movie, they redesign the characters' costumes slightly. Hawkeye's costumes have evolved. I know, because I buy the Hot Toys. And they do that for a reason. And with this Star Trek show, there wasn't any... I mean, maybe I would buy that Picard in an Admiral's outfit. I didn't like it when I first saw it, but I liked him wearing it. I might buy Picard in that. But other than that, it is spin they're whipping up, Jeff. Thanks for supporting the channel. Mark C. said... He sends in a super chat and says, I called you Fandom Menace because you have had the pleasure of being called a toxic fan by one of the creators of this mess. Mark C., you're right. You're right. Called a toxic fan. It's absolutely true. Absolutely true. I have a ton of letters. And I should just stay on this show. And I think I have 26 letters to read. I wonder if I just stayed and just read your comments and just stayed. Because, why not? I could go and bang them out. I've got so many letters to get through. Right now, right in front of me, I have 26 letters. 26. Let's just jump into it, shall we? This one comes from Trent R. Hi, Rob. This is my first letter. I can take out my glasses now. This is my first letter, and I've watched your show for quite a while now. I've sent you some super chats before, and the last one was about a week and a half ago about your Anton Chigurh figure, only because I think he's one of the best movie villains ever put on screen. Great character. I'm writing to you, though, about Star Wars. I know you get a ton of these and have probably heard my same opinions about the franchise from other viewers, but I hope you don't mind. No, Trent, especially when it's your first letter. Of course I don't mind. I have to be honest. I'm pretty conflicted right now with Star Wars. I like what they're doing, but I also don't like what they're doing. After The Rise of Skywalker, I've been somewhat turned off by the franchise. It's just so messy right now, especially how the sequel trilogy finished off. Let me say, though, I liked all three sequel movies to an extent, with Rise of Skywalker being my favorite of the three. I think The Last Jedi, though, is the best made movie of the three and has the best direction, even though it was halted by about half the fan base. Or even though it is hated by half the fan base. I just don't understand how they couldn't have done a better job on connecting all 9 movies. Anakin Skywalker is my favorite movie character of all time. His story is just pure joy to me. And not once did they mention the name Anakin in the sequel trilogy. Sure, they mentioned Vader, which is the same person, but it was Anakin who brought balance, who killed Palpatine and saved the galaxy for 30 years. I was really, really disappointed that Anakin was not shown physically in The Rise of Skywalker, and it really is kind of disrespectful, in my opinion, to that character. Well, he was going to be shown in the original Duel of the Fates script. I really think they dropped the ball on that. I honestly think it has to do with JJ just not liking the prequels. For shit's sake, they don't even put Duel of the Fates into The Rise of Skywalker when it was played like every frickin' time on those TV spots. Anyway, I still enjoyed the characters for what they were. Kylo Ben Solo was by far my favorite character, and his story was the best in my opinion. I liked The Rise of Skywalker the best because it focused more on the 2 main characters, Rey and Kylo, and the other movies did, and Palpatine was in it. Bring back Palpatine was a good idea, and it does connect all 9. The fact that he had a contingency plan to clone himself into another body in case he would be overthrown, that makes sense to me because he knew Vader was strong enough to overthrow him. He knew it all along, so he had this contingency plan. I wish it was actually explained better in Rise of Skywalker, but I guess J.J. Abrams just likes to mystify things, but it's very, very frustrating. Rob, I hope JJ is done with Star Wars. He makes great visual shots, but his story building just isn't really very good. That's in my opinion. Even though I did think he did a good job with finishing off Rey and Ben Solo as characters, and in the end, even though I really wanted Ben to live, to change that story and put him on exile on Tatooine, but whatever. And the last shot of the Skywalker trilogy of the Lars homestead and seeing Rey explore that place was really cool. And the Binary Suns was awesome. JJ did a great job on that. Anyway, Rob, I just believe they could have done so much better with the sequels, even though some things I think they do very well and some things they do not. Star Wars is very important to me, and I do expect a lot, I admit, that because Episode 4, A New Hope, is literally my favorite movie of all time. The Mandalorian was good, not great, but I thought it was good, and with the last 2 episodes being the best, in my opinion. I look forward to Season 2 and where they go with that story. I gotta be honest, though. I hear rumblings of Boba Fett being in Season 2, and I do not want that. He is dead. He died in the Sarlacc pit. No more fake deaths, please. Stop messing with the original trilogy. It already happened. Stick with new characters, but that's my subjective opinion on that. Anyway, Rob, I'm jumping around a lot here, and I apologize. I feel like J.J. Abrams making a film jumping around everywhere with the plot. We need a brand new trilogy in Star Wars with writers and a storyteller having a plan of what it will be and sticking to it. I also think eventually they should continue Rey's story. Don't make it Episode 10 just to do something with her. I'm curious where she can go and what other villains they can create to combat her, but that will be years down the road. Anyway, Rob, I ranted a little here because I'm frustrated with the franchise and Lucasfilm only because it means a lot to me. It really does. Time for new directions and maybe new leadership at the top, as well as hopefully they get on the ball here in the next year or so. Rob, I enjoy listening to you. Your optimism and positivity is great. Thanks for having a great show, and I might write more letters in the future. Take care and stay safe during these times. Trent R. Well, Trent, as far as first letters go, that's pretty damn good. I want to thank you for writing in. Look, I think you know what we're talking about here, whether it's Doctor Who, whether it's Star Wars, whether it's Star Trek. I think the frustration is we have been surrounded by great television writing and great movie writing, really satisfying movie writing. Watching movies like Arrival and Blade Runner 2049 and hopefully Denis Villeneuve's upcoming Dune. You know, when we see movies like this and we see TV shows like I looked at Ozark, I'm like, all right, they took a central theme, a central idea, and they attacked it and explored it from many different angles. They kept the tension up, and they really delivered 10 episodes of a great show. And I think when we have that kind of great writing surrounding us, when it comes to these franchises that should be leading the way, that should have the best writing of all, Doctor Who, Star Trek, Star Wars, these are the Tiffany science fiction franchises that are running today. Look, The Expanse, which I love, The Expanse is based on a series of books, and they're doing a very good job. There's things they have to change because that's what happens when you're adapting. But for the most part, the people writing The Expanse have the books. to draw from. So I understand why they're good. There's 9 books. I'm wondering if they're going to get through all 9. I mean, I think there's only 8 now, but there's going to be a 9th, and it's supposed to end after that. But if the show keeps going on, and that's the real frustration, is there's so much good stuff around us. I mean, why does Star Trek Picard's plotline so closely resemble Mass Effect 3? Why? I mean, it's can't be coincidence. You know, you have a lot of writers, not just Michael Chabon or Akiva Goldsman or Kirsten Beyer, but there are people in that writer's room that have, goddamn, they played those games. People who work on Star Trek Online, they all know. And you know, when you can watch, there was a video that dropped today, whether it was Anti-Trekker, I don't know who made the actual video, but I put it up on Twitter. I tweeted it. I watched it and I was like, my God. I mean, it's so egregious. And it's like, if you know that it's that, let's change it up. But I think that's the frustration. There's so much great writing. Where is the Star Trek equivalent of True Detective Season 1? People look at me and go, well, that's a detective show. I'm not talking about doing a detective show, but I'm talking about a Star Trek show that grapples with the kind of ideas that it puts forth in ways that we saw like in True Detective Season 1, where you had one director delving into this storyline and really attacking it from all angles and giving you something that's essential viewing. Why isn't Star Trek like that? I mean, these people get their hooks into it. It's very lucrative. They're not going to leave. Why would you leave when you're in a paying job? You don't leave. You stick with it you until you run it to the ground. But what's interesting is, you know, Star Trek has this legacy that also has to be honored. You know, they sell, if you want to buy the Akuda's hardcover Star Trek Encyclopedia, 2-volume Star Trek Encyclopedia, look how much it costs on eBay. You know, there's a whole Star Trek continuum that you have to honor. And what these shows are doing, if I was the boss, if I was at CBS, I'd be like, you guys are undermining our entire franchise because there's no merchandise. Where's the merchandise from your show? Is Eagle Moss selling as many Discovery starships as they're selling Next Generation or original series ships? Are they? I mean, you can actually quantify with a company like Eagle Moss that's selling spaceships, Star Trek spaceships. You could go in and go, hey, Eagle Moss, how many spaceships, how many Discovery spaceships do you sell compared to all of the other spaceships in the franchise? I mean, there's a quantifiable number. Find out what that number is. Do you sell as many Discovery ships as everything else? Well, that's a pretty good indicator. Why? Because people don't want to, I don't know if that's true, by the way, but people don't, do they want to buy Discovery ships? I don't. I've been buying spaceships, Star Trek spaceship models since I was 5 years old. I have no desire to own any ship that was designed for the Discovery franchise. I think using myself as a bellwether, that is as bellwether or a litmus test or whatever, that's a huge thing that I don't want to buy a Star Trek spaceship that's on a starship that's on a Star Trek show. I've never found myself in that position. Like, I don't know if I like the NX-01 as far as its lineage in the Star Trek universe, but I like the ship. It's pretty cool. I own 5 different versions of the NX-01. The Eagle Moss versions. I've got Diamond Toy Art Asylum, I think, made the Enterprise NX-01. And I've got the 1/350 scale model. And I like that ship. There's nothing in Discovery that I want to own. That's a problem. That's a problem. It's not because I'm old. It's because the Star Trek ships, I feel the same way about the Kelvin Universe ships. I mean, I have a Franklin up there that I got in a DVD pack. I didn't buy the model. I like the Kelvin. I have a miniature of that, but I haven't bought the model. But other than that, that's a problem. I don't know what my point is, but hey, let's see. Here's another letter from Preston Copeland. Preston Copeland says, hey, Rob, how is the Sultan of Sweaty doing today? Well, I would never call myself that, even though it's a great name, because the term sweaty will now and forever belong to my great friend, the late, great John Schnepp, who I did Heroes with for 3.5 years. So I would never call myself a sweaty. That is his term, and it belongs to him. But I want to thank you for bringing him up, because whenever somebody makes me think of John Schnepp, I thank them. So I watched your hissing rant on current Star Trek and felt inspired. You mean you're watching right now and you wrote this letter? No. There's something about pure, unadulterated rage that makes for good entertainment. I wish I could set you loose on the hideousness of Justice League and how Joss Whedon is a traitor. Look, I really respect Joss Whedon as a creator. I mean, I like, of course, Firefly. I really love Buffy and Angel. I even like Dollhouse to a certain extent. I don't blame him for that. I don't, and I love his Avengers movies. So I would never go medieval on him. Anyways, your thoughts on Star Trek got me to check out Picard. I quickly found that I was like a child who wanders into the middle of a movie. I half expected Walter Sobchak to berate me hideously. Well, I researched the Google and found some episodes that could give me a frame of reference in the Star Trek universe. Here they are: Best of Both Worlds 1 and 2, I, Borg; Voyager's Dark Frontier, Collective, and Unimatrix 1 and 2. Then I checked First Contact out. Needless to say, I'm oozing Trek from every pore. COVID-19 doesn't have shit on a bath of TNG mixed with 7 of 9. In fact, I could be quarantined with that Borg throwaway any day of the week and twice on Sunday. I now feel prepared for a watch of Picard. I still have the majority of the series to experience and look forward to the gnashing of teeth and stark hatred that will surface at season's end. Your thoughts on my homework? Are there other episodes you might recommend? I already see the change in tone from TNG, Voyager, and Picard. They feel, as Mr. Nerdrotic might say, very jar-jarred. Anyway, talk soon. All the best, Preston. No, I think those are good. I think those are good places to start. But you know, there are other Picard episodes, like of course Inner Light, and you should watch Inner Light because that is a really compelling cornerstone Star Trek: The Next Generation episode. You know, watch an episode that I love of Next Generation that's completely unsung is an episode early on in the third season called The Survivors, where you find, well, I don't want to ruin it for you, but watch that. But there's a lot. You know, you can Google best episodes of Star Trek, but I think you've done a pretty good job. Dark Frontier, Collective, Unimatrix Zero. I think you have to watch the last episode of Voyager as well to understand. And there's a lot of other episodes of Voyager with Icheb and all of the Borg drones that are definitely worth watching. Check those out. Can't wait to hear what you think. Kenny Crayley Jr. I think it's Crawley. I think Kenneth Crayley. Hello, Rob and members of the Post-Geek Singularity. I'm back again with another letter, and today I'm here to talk about the CW DC Comics, DC TV television universe, known to some as the Arrowverse. After Smallville ended in 2011, the CW and Warner Brothers Television wanted to create their own shared comics universe on TV. Thus, the Arrowverse was born, led by Greg Berlanti and showrunners like Mark Guggenheim and many other producers and writers on the shows. Starting first with Arrow in 2011, the CW told a bold move not starting with their biggest players in DC Comics lore for their shared TV universe. Then in 2014 came The Flash, and then in 2015, DC's Legends of Tomorrow, and Supergirl in 2015, first on CBS, and then it eventually moved to the CW for Season 2 in 2016. And after that came Black Lightning in 2018 and Batwoman in 2019. All the shows are very different in style and storytelling. Arrow and Batwoman more darker and grittier and more grounded. The Flash and Supergirl more comic book, more pop, more fun, but not campy. DC's Legends of Tomorrow, a show that is mostly comedy, really bonkers with lots of superhero stuff in it. Black Lightning is more of a show about social justice. Sure, yes, the shows are not perfect. Not every episode and season are amazing, but the special effects at times are not movie quality. But what the CW and the DC Comics pull off with these Arrowverse shows is nothing short of amazing, and they continue to get better each season, from season 1 to where they are now. Sure, they started out small with characters like Green Arrow, Flash, Supergirl, Black Lightning, but now with bigger players like Superman coming into the fold and the upcoming Superman and Lois TV series, the Arrowverse is not going away anytime soon. And lastly, the actors of these shows, like Stephen Amell as Green Arrow, Oliver Queen, Grant Gustin as The Flash and Barry Allen, and Melissa Benoist as Supergirl, Kara Zor-El, Kara Danvers, and even the new Superman, Clark Kent, Tyler Hoechlin, they all respect these comic book characters they play and the material that is given to them, and they make it work to the best of their abilities. Sure, the DC films are hit and miss at times, but the DC television universe is vast with broader storytelling. Big props to the CW, DC Comics, and Greg Berlanti for creating such a vast comic book television universe and how it keeps going for many years to come. Thanks, Rob, and members of the Post-Geek Singularity. Keep up the great work and stay safe out there, everyone. Sincerely, longtime listener and watcher, Kenny Crayley Jr. from Ohio. Well, Kenny, what a delightful letter. Look, I agree with you. I think what they're doing with the CW shows has been great. It's not, on TV budgets, they're trying to pull off a lot of stuff. I even like the fact that while I thought Crisis on Infinite Earths was a mess, Crisis on Earth X was interesting. The crossover shows are fun. And you know what those shows do? They set an expectation and they deliver on that. They put a smile on your face. And while they'll maybe never be considered high art, I do think that they are quite effective at what they're setting out to do. And again, for me, it's always about authorship. Is it successful in what it sets out to do? And I think what they're trying to do, what Greg Berlanti and his team tried to do, they are succeeding at. And that I enjoy. Brian Eng sends in a letter. Crazy idea. You and Elizabeth doing a cooking show. You can call it Burnett and Bell Bakes. Well, that's kind of funny. Burnett and Bell Bakes. You know what? While I can follow a recipe, and if I have to cook things, I'll cook things. I just have an aversion to cleaning, so that's why I don't like to, I'll make myself, I love Progresso soup. I don't care. People tell me it's got too much sodium in it. I've always loved Progresso soup, and I like to get like a bowl, and I'll dump. I didn't even know that we had any, because Elizabeth, she's like, don't eat that processed stuff, and she'll make me a chicken noodle soup from scratch. But I like Progresso soup, and I'm the kind of guy that I dumped 3 cans of Progresso soup in a pot the other night, and I will eat it right out of the pot to have one less bowl to clean. I'm that kind of guy. So just so you know, but it could be fun. I could watch her cook, and I would learn. It could be fun, but I know she'd probably like that. We'll see. We're getting more people are watching, whining about movies. People seem to like it, so that's kind of cool. This is, wow, here's a letter. First of all, let me jump over to see what you guys are saying over here. Stub McShave sends in a tip and says, here are some in-world curses in the Wheel of Time. Let's see if you have any idea what they mean. Blood and ashes, milk-faced vixen, burn me, sheep swallop, and bloody butter of onions, goat kissing idiot, light blinded fool, and many more. Those are good curses. I don't know if I really want to address what milk-faced vixens look like. I know what milk-faced vixens look like in my universe, and it means I'm a happy man. That's too far. I think I went too far just now. I think I might have. Blood and ashes. I don't know. A goat-kissing idiot, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. A light-blinded fool. Maybe a light-blinded fool is an optimist who just doesn't understand the gravity of what's going on. Like me, I'm Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky. Like, hey, isn't this rad? Not understanding the severity of the situation that's bearing down upon me. Maybe that's what that means. I'm not sure. Mark Chure sends in a super chat and says, use your aggressive feelings, Rob. Soon you will be one of us, and your journey to the dark side will be complete. Well, look, I think while I could never be somebody that's part of the Phantom Menace only because my ties in the industry, I also know how hard it is to make shows, movies and television. It's really hard. I understand the politics, and anybody that gets something made gets somewhat my respect. But again, in this day and age, what we're not getting from Star Trek is authorship. What I think we're seeing is again, too many cooks. Everything feels like a gangbang. Nothing feels thought through, because they bring up, like I said, Picard has a lot of really intriguing concepts in it, but they've got 50 of them when there should have been 6 that should have been really explored from every direction. And I feel like that we're not getting that, and it's unfortunate. And especially because basically Michael Chabon wrote like all the last 4 episodes, I think, or something. And Michael Chabon has written, in my mind, some of the most lackluster Star Trek, and it's baffling to me, having read his books. I really don't get it. I really don't understand how a man who wrote The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay, or The Secret Policeman's Union, or even his book that I loved on manhood, how could he have written such... But you know what? Here's what I've come to understand. Writing or knowing the science fiction genre, there's a lot of people, it's like the attitude that people took towards superheroes for the longest time. Everyone thought that, yeah, I could write a Superman story, I know. But in their mind, they didn't really take the character seriously. And one of the reasons we couldn't get superhero movies that were any good is because people thought they were only superhero movies. Now, as much as I like Lauren Shuler Donner as a person, and I did meet with her when we were making the X-Men special features, she did at first think the original X-Men movie was going to fail. She did not understand that what Bryan Singer had done was more along the lines in the first X-Men movie was how X-Men comic book readers thought of the X-Men. The X-Men, very serious. You open an X-Men movie at Auschwitz. You know, by doing that and doing the setup, I mean, sure, you've got Toad and Magneto and Sabretooth, and they're pretty cartoon-esque portrayals of Toad and Sabretooth. But for the most part, the material stays pretty grounded. And she thought that was going to fail because she wanted more of a comic book movie. She didn't even go to the Ellis Island premiere of X-Men because she was so afraid it was going to fail. That's how a lot of people felt. A lot of people just thought comic books were comic books, and that you don't need to take them seriously. You know, you don't need. Well, that's how people feel about Star Trek. I think, look, Rick Berman produced 25 seasons of Star Trek. That was his job. He resolved himself to that job because he made a shit ton of money. He made a lot of money. He had job security. You're not going to leave. Do you think, like, my dad was an insurance broker for 30 years. He was vice president of an insurance company. He did a good job. I don't think his job made him happy. I don't think when he was growing up as a boy, he wanted to be an insurance salesman. The time my dad grew up, he went into a field of work. He got a job. He worked his way up within that field of work. In his mind, that was his job. And he wanted to be a good insurance salesman, but I don't think it particularly gave him a lot of joy. His clients gave him joy. His clients, the people that he dealt with, he liked his clientele because he liked people. You know, he was excited about that. But I don't think the work. And I think in the case of Star Trek, Rick Berman is a very well-traveled man. He is a man of exquisite tastes. And I think he took this Star Trek job because he was going to be out at Paramount anyway. He inherited this job. He got the job. He did it to the best of his ability. And he made a shit ton of money for 25 seasons of Star Trek. I don't think anybody here who, like Michael Chabon, yes, I grew up with Star Trek. I did. I watched it. And even he can write articles about relating to his father and all that. All he wants. But I still think that there is a disconnect with, ever since 2009, there is a lack of application of storytelling logic to Star Trek. They believe that it's just Star Trek, so we can have all of these shortcuts. Why can't they beam across the universe? Absolutely, they can beam from Delta Vega onto the Enterprise, and hey, let's have Scotty get caught. He beamed into a tube full of water. Because why not? I mean, just that little, it sums it up to me. Like, you can beam onto a starship that's traveling at warp. Think about that. How can you, anybody who no, we'll just, the plot, we need to get them back on the Enterprise. They'll just beam aboard with super transwarp beaming technology. Just because. Well, when I watch that as a Star Trek fan, I'm like, you're an idiot because transporters are not magical. They're just not. And I feel the same way. I mean, there's look at how J.J. Abrams, who clearly likes Star Wars, he completely destroys the idea of hyperspace. Hyperspace had rules. You have to plot a course. You can't just turn on the hyperdrive and, oops, sorry, I'm getting all. You can't just turn on the hyperdrive and jump into the middle of a city's skyline. That's not how it works. And then, of course, the fans are left to put all the pieces together. Anybody who's writing the Star Wars visual dictionary is probably pulling their hair out going, what kind of bullshit is this? This is the problem. This is where we're at with these franchises, because the people that are writing them have, I think, they're taking a cursory approach, a very superficial approach. And that's what I feel so upset about when I see these things. It's the superficial approach that they take to all of this. And we as fans are sitting here going, well, wait a minute. They don't take a superficial approach to Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul. The quality of writing on a science fiction show should be just as good. It should be just as good. You know, if you're going to create Flights of Fancy, you better make it as fucking good as Breaking Bad. You know, you do. That's what Star Trek deserves. It's owed that. It's owed that. And what we're getting is, we're getting a bunch of fucking idiots that aren't smart enough, or they're not taking enough time. They're not doing the work. They're not doing the work they need to do. I feel like we've all turned into, I feel like we're the teachers that we're powerless because of helicopter parenting, and we're dealing with all of our students turning half-assed assignments in because nobody wants to sit down and really do the work, what it really takes to write a great essay or a great a paper, whatever you have to write a paper on. I remember I wrote a paper on Sinclair Lewis's book Main Street for Carol Pankey, a teacher I had a crush on because I thought she was so brilliant when I was in high school. But you know, I spent a long time writing this paper on Sinclair Lewis's Main Street. I didn't just read the Cliff's Notes. I read the book, and I felt like the story that was about somebody who wanted to shape a society and the image they had for it, and it didn't work. You know, and I started out, I even quoted, I have this paper too. I could read it. I still kept it. And I used the quote from This Side of Paradise, Elias Sandoval's Colony. Another dream that failed. There's nothing sadder. And I wrote this paper, and I was like, I wanted her to know that I had read this book and I really understood what Sinclair Lewis was going for. I feel like it's all a bunch of guys and girls just tossing this shit off, and they don't take the time to like why? How does somebody who loves Star Wars not understand that flying through hyperspace ain't like dusting crops, boy? That'd end your trip real quick. You don't want to bounce too close to a supernova. And then, oh no, we're going to do light speed skipping into the middle of a city. That's the dumbest, stupidest shit I've ever heard. And yet, yeah, let's do that. And you know what? Because you have a director, somebody can't go, yeah, that's not how light speed works. You know? Yeah, you can't even fly into a planetary. You shouldn't be able to do that. You can't go into the gravity well of a planet coming right out of hyperspace. I mean, Star Trek has made those mistakes too. You know, if you're in the gravity well of a planet, you shouldn't be able to go to light speed. That will tear your ship apart. But hey, no, we'll just do light speed skipping because it looks cool. Fuck that. I mean, that destroys your verisimilitude. You know, and hyperspace did have verisimilitude. We can't just blow away. I mean, we've got to fix the hyperdrive. It's got to be, the course has to be plotted. I don't even know what I'm talking about. But that's what Mark C. It gets me so angry. Wes Moody webcast sends in a super chat and says, the fandom menace welcomes you. Picard was dumb. Well, I'm happy to be on Fandom Menace channels and chat with my friends there. Because I like what they do. Dan V tipped and said, what's interesting about people calling you toxic is that many people who love The Last Jedi are doing the behavior they called out since they didn't like The Rise of Skywalker. A perfect example of this is Dana Schwartz, who did a very distasteful joke yesterday. Hypocrites. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all coming to grips with the fact, like, I watched Michael Burnham holding up the tattered Federation flag with this new season 3 of Discovery coming soon. And I'm like, in that outfit, in that costume, everything about that image and what they're evoking is antithetical to my way of thinking, but whatever. Anyway, yes, I think people are look, I will always like Last Jedi. I think Rise, I did not like The Force Awakens at all. I'll flat out say it. I didn't like it at all. As soon as Rey was flying the Millennium Falcon like she'd owned it for decades, I'm like, I don't believe this. I don't believe it. And people are like, well, Luke was never shown as being the kind of pilot Rey is in The Force Awakens. I mean, can you imagine if an aircraft actually caught its landing gear in the sand as it was trying to take off? You know what would happen? It would go simple physics. I know, talking about physics in Star Wars, but you can only, that was too big of an ask. But anyway, here's a new letter. Sean McCommings. This is a long one. Rob, you and others have covered the topic of why Picard doesn't satisfy Star Trek fans. Thanks for that. You've brought up issues I didn't think of and generally enlightened what has been, in my opinion, a very cumbersome discussion. Cumbersome, in my opinion, because most people are spending a lot of energy on details but aren't getting to me. Aren't getting what is to me the heart of the matter. Therefore, here's the thing. I guess I say here's the thing a lot. I guess it's a catchphrase. Here's the thing that doesn't work for me about Star Trek Picard. Note, this will be a brief rant on the state of Star Trek post-2009. I love this letter already. If there's anything that doesn't work for me in Star Trek Picard, it is that one cannot start a new Star Trek series with the Federation and Starfleet being broken and not tell me why and how this has happened. Amen. If I am to believe Star Trek is in a place where the Federation is cynical and that Starfleet officers can F-bomb each other, then that story needs to be told for me to buy it. You can't throw this plot point on the table and expect me as a longtime Star Trek fan to go along with it because this slices against everything Star Trek historically has been. The concept may be okay as a journey to a grittier Star Trek is potentially an interesting one. Deep Space Nine often showed how the Federation could be out of touch or insignificant or insufficient to deal with the problems in the universe. The best episode to me is In the Pale Moonlight, where Sisko conspires to kill a Romulan senator and ends up able to live with it. But there were many other gems. Business as usual. Quark sells weapons that could kill millions, but decides not to because there are better things than profit. With the great Steven Berkoff, who absolutely nails the criminal nutter in this episode. We have 24 armored tank divisions in Czechoslovakia. Steven Berkoff is so great in Octopussy as General Orlov. That was just an aside. That's not in this letter. Inquisition, which introduces Section 31, a Federation black organization which keeps the Federation the paradise it was supposed to be. I don't know if Section 31 is a Federation organization. It is an organization, I think, outside the Federation that is tasked to do this, and quietly eliminates anyone who thinks otherwise. In TNG, Captain Ben Maxwell tried to start his own war with the Cardassians in The Wounded, but maybe he was right. In the original series, Captain Ron Tracy sells out the Prime Directive for eternal life in the Omega Glory. Captain Merrick sells out his crew in Bread and Circuses. These examples are interesting for a reason. There is a contrast against the ideals of Starfleet and the Federation. In Star Trek, there is a Prime Directive. An apocryphal source states it as such. As the right of each sentient species to live in accordance with its normal cultural evolution is considered sacred, no Starfleet personnel may interfere with the normal and healthy development of alien life and culture. Such interference includes introducing superior knowledge, strength, or technology to a world whose society is incapable of handling such advantages wisely. Starfleet personnel may not violate this Prime Directive even to save their lives and or their ship, unless they are acting to right an earlier violation or an accidental contamination of said culture. This directive takes precedence over any and all other considerations and carries with it the highest moral obligation. I love that. Thus, the Federation does not interfere with non-warp capable civilizations. As seen in Star Trek First Contact, this is an extension of Vulcan doctrine. From our history and society, this relates to examples we have seen on Earth. When more advanced technology is artificially introduced to a society, when there is typically a lot of death, and that society may break up with its culture lost forever. So I think all of this is why new Star Trek isn't good. But there's something more. It's really the lack of understanding of previous shows is the biggest flaw with all post-2009 Star Trek. The characters are all cardboard cutouts because what motivates them is undefined. They're not motivated by the norms from previous incarnations of Star Trek. We don't know how we got here from there, especially for fans that have been with the show for a long time. This, in my opinion, is why the new shows are not easy to relate or believe. Here's the thing, used courtesy of Robert Meyer Burnett, all rights reserved. Rant on the state of Star Trek post-2009, used courtesy of Robert Meyer Burnett, all rights reserved. I did not make that up. He put it in there. Sean, I think you nailed it. This is a great letter. You really nailed one of the problems with modern Trek is all of these people that have been writing Star Trek since 2009 are using amazing narrative shortcuts that don't make sense. And I think the same is true of Star Wars. And the fact that they're the same people makes a lot of sense to me. This was my problem with things like Lost or Alias, any of these shows that Bad Robot has been involved with or their ilk, because they do make these kinds of leaps because they're not really interested. J.J. Abrams is not interested in getting from point A to point B, or actually from point A to point. If J.J. Abrams wants to get from point A to point D, he'll just go straight there. B, C don't matter. And that's how he writes. Oh, Vulcan's being attacked. We have to get the Enterprise to Vulcan. Well, wait a minute. We're in the middle of an academic. Kirk's being disciplined. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. But he's a cadet at Starfleet Command. He's not even on a ship. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We'll just get them. We'll move all the cadets to the ships. We'll go to Vulcan. We'll start the story. Well, that's not how great storytelling works. You know, cadets don't just get onto a ship when they're not even done getting their education and run into battle because Vulcan's being attacked. But in J.J. Abrams' universe, they do. You want to do light speed skipping where the Millennium Falcon just appears in the middle of a city? How does that work? Because you know what? Going through hyperspace ain't like dust and crops, boy. Well, J.J. Abrams is a boy. He didn't even think about that. It's like, no, man, I just want a cool visual. They're just gonna come out from light speed in the middle of this city because they're skipping from place to place to place. Well, anybody who's like, oh, wait a minute, JJ, you know, in the Star Wars universe, light speed has no, he doesn't care. And we as fans, we do care. That's part of the appeal. It's when you've limited, you can't just use hyperdrive and wind up wherever you want to go. Well, they've been eroding that. I mean, even Star Wars has its own internal verisimilitude. Even fantasy, hell, especially fantasy. In Star Trek, we now have whatever the device the synth's made up. We haven't even... What does it do? Do you have to touch it to anything? Do you just hold on to it and wish for things to happen? Well, that's absurd. That's absurd. I mean, you know, why don't give it... Anyway, this is a great letter, Sean. That's what I was trying to say. It is a fine letter you have written. This one comes from Desmond Harris. Hi, Toyman. Thank you for continually pushing the thought-provoking source wall. Picard topics. Does the show or lack of story change with the removal of these characters? The sword corridor killing Romulan. Hugh, who could have been played by anyone. Or non-Borg, as the character brought nothing to the table. Incest Romulan sister. Dr. Girardi. The entire Borg cube. Or 7 of 9. I was so hoping the show would improve for me by staying to the end. There were small moments, Data and Picard discussing, Riker in the captain's chair at a standoff, just not going into a mindless space battle, providing a diplomatic solution first. However, to me, it was a majority 97% disappointment, not forcing old quotes or references, just to tick the box for more experienced Star Trek watchers. After recently watching Deep Space Nine for the first time, and naturally comparing shows, I get the impression there is way more story substance versus character development within one episode of Deep Space Nine or Voyager compared to the 10 episodes of Picard put together. I continually ask myself, if I remove the characters mentioned, does the show of Picard change massively? Each time I ask myself the question, I came to the answer of no, leading me to ask, what was the point of including them? I even asked several friends who are not into Star Trek to watch Picard, and they came back asking similar questions and stating there's no real drive to want to continue with the show. In the end, I was left feeling and thinking the show or story did not respect my time to watch it. Your thoughts? Kind regards, Desmond. P.S. Is that an Animal Man book behind you? Yes, it is, as a matter of fact. Well, you can't see it anymore, but... Ooh, Indiana Jones, it's over there. I do have that Grant Morrison Animal Man omnibus run. Yes, and I love that run. I really wanted to do that when I was making Hills Run Red afterwards, I'd actually created a document of doing, before the CW, I wanted to do a series of direct-to-video, low-budget, live-action superhero movies that I thought could be done, and I wanted to do Animal Man as it. I did. I wanted to do the Animal Man series. I love it. I think you're right. Look, I think what's really interesting is when they transferred Picard's body into a synth golem, they made it the same age as Picard already was, that he might die at any time. So he's basically, it's just did you happen to know that I'm no longer human? I'm a synth? I mean, what was the point? There's literally no change other than the fact that he is a synth. It's so weird. Like, why bother doing that? I don't know. I really don't. This is a funny letter. So Luke Reichelt, who's been writing in, he has made videos that I actually watched, which are hilarious, and I will play on this show. However, there was music on them, and I need to hear back from Luke if those are fair use or if those songs would have a copyright strike against this channel. But Luke has written us. He's a new member of the Post-Geek Singularity community. But it was funny because he's really into Funko Pops, and he was putting them in an aquarium, and I asked, are they buoyant? I mean, what happens? Excuse me, what happens? Dear Rob, I'm writing in response to your question yesterday to me regarding the buoyancy of Funko Pops. You know, it didn't even enter my head when I started building the SpongeBob aquarium, but you are indeed correct. They fucking just float. You'd think I'd remember, because, boss, this isn't the first time I've submerged pop vinyls. I recently put a Snoke pop in a jam jar. I totally forgot he floated. So I got rocks out of the garden, and I'm going to tie the SpongeBob pops to the rocks with some fishing line. If that doesn't work, I'll tackle the problem with tackle. Fishing tackle. Sinkers. I'll glue sinkers onto the pop's bases. Listen, Rob, one way or another, these little bastards will sink, mark my words. They're going to sleep with the fishes, if you know what I mean. In fact, they'll do every activity with the fishes because they'll be happily living at the bottom of a fish tank. I hope this clears everything up. Take care, everyone. Luke Reichelt. Yeah, you've been nailing my last name, the pronunciation. It's Reichelt. Oh, okay, it is Reichelt. Reichelt, there you go, Reichelt. I was missing it. P.S. Play the sci-fi video I sent you. It's dope. Get on that. You'll dig it. I wrote a funny letter to go with it. Well, Luke Reichelt, I will. By the way, I'll bet you, because those Funko Pops are like Rotocast figures, if you can pop, I don't know, I've never tried to pop. I've got my Hannibal Lecter right up there. I'll bet you that there's a hole in them, and if you put them underwater, you can either squeeze them a little bit and it'll suck water in. I'll bet you can fill them up with water. I don't know if that'll be enough to sink them, but I bet you could try. Dirty Nerdy sends in a tip and says, at least old Trek had some cool sounding technobabble to explain how to do impossible things. New Trek doesn't even bother to do that. Just magical devices that read your thoughts instead. In your words, Rob, a failure of imagination. Such a failure of imagination. Chris Cocking sends in a super chat and says, tell us a bedtime story about your favorite TOS episode. You want me to tell you the TOS episode or a bedtime story about? I'd have to think about that. That's I couldn't just do that off the top of my head. That's tough. I'd have to think about that for a minute. My favorite bedtime story about a TOS episode. You know what? Just to make it interesting, I'd probably make it about the alternative factor, an episode that I have a particularly fond. It's a terrible episode of Star Trek, but I have a fondness for it. And I always like to bring it up, and people laugh at me. But I would probably turn the alternative factor into a bedtime story if I had to do that. But that's what I would do. Bob Kowal, Mr. Attic Hatch is here. Bob Kowal says, Mr. B, okay, totally bonkers movie to go with your Quarantini with a twist of Shyamalan proportions. 1974's Darktown Strutters. Wow, I don't know this movie. Darktown Strutters. Roger Ebert categorized Darktown Strutters as the first black motorcycle gang rock sci-fi musical. Oh my God, I'm so in. How have I never heard of this? Amazon Prime's plot description. The plot concerns the mother of a black biker babe being abducted by an evil chicken and ribs tycoon. I might describe it as a low-budget blaxploitation version of Blazing Saddles. Worth the price of admission is the star, Trina Parks, 007's Thumper. I was going to say, I know who Trina Parks is, as Serena. Bambi and Thumper, Trina Parks was in Diamonds Are Forever. Some of the rest of the cast will be familiar TV and movie faces, more fun to discover them as you watch. So yeah, biker mamas riding Big Daddy Roth-style motor trikes, taking it to the man and the clan as you continue watching. The words "holy shit" were what were they smoking and how did this get made might cross your lips more than a couple of times. I really don't want to reveal more. I suggest you check it out before the wrong people notice and this thing gets banned. Okay, the promised twist of Shyamalan proportions. Darktown Strutters is written and directed by a couple of old honkies. Written by George Armitage, who would later write Miami Blues and Grosse Pointe Blank, and directed by 60-year-old William Whitney. Oh my God. Whitney at that point had 20 years in the business with over 140 directing credits to his name. He directed a Fu Manchu TV series in the 50s, but mostly directed movie and TV westerns, including a couple of episodes of Wild Wild West. Wow. So yeah, another reason the 70s rocked. Darktown Strutters. Best regards, Bob Quall, a.k.a. Attic Hatch. Oh my God, this must be on... Is this on Amazon? Is this streaming? Man, I think all of us should watch Darktown Strutters, and maybe I'll do an episode on it. This sounds amazing. George Armitage, man, that's incredible. That is incredible. Yeah, I want to see that. This next letter comes from James Kevins. James Kevins says, "Greetings, Rob. I just wanted to share a couple of short thoughts. Given the talent involved, Picard should be the gold standard of television. You're right, it should be. But it is disjointed and an embarrassment. In a recent Variety interview, showrunner Michael Chabon complained that there is a small, sad corner of fandom that just never got the memo. They don't understand what Star Trek is and was always about. He also said that he was leaving the show as it was impossible to be a showrunner on more than one show. Gary over at Nerdrotic notes that Rick Berman seems to have been able to pull it off. I love it when Gary drops that truth. Is it just me, or does it seem that this story is nothing more than a jumbled mess? You could remove all the Borg elements from the show and still end up at the relatively same place. Yep. Rob, you have pointed out that the show is now established as canon that there's a race of super synth gods coming to destroy all organic life. Okay, why? Why not just move the endangered synths to their synth god galaxy? That is what the preservers would have done. Rob, you also noted that it's good that the Federation lifted the ban on synths. Did anyone stop to think that the Romulans know how to hack in and take control of synth bodies? Since Picard now has a synth body, that means he has an on-off switch, and the Romulans have their fingers on that button. Did Michael Chabon not get the memo about that? I'm not sure I want to get too far into the outing of Seven. I really don't see myself as homophobic. Honestly, as long as everyone involved is of legal age and sober and consenting, it's no one else's business who you choose to love. But Seven? Every time she's shown on screen exploring her sexuality, it's been with the male partner. The final word on the matter, I think, is in the episode Unimatrix Zero, where we learn that Borg drones have created a psychic group mind where their original personalities emerge while they regenerate. This is a utopian environment where your fondest desires are played out. Seven has visited many times, and she took a male lover named Axum. Does this sound like she's LGBT? To me, it feels more like tokenism. It's the worst kind of tokenism. You ignore decades of continuity and world building just to take an established character and put your mark on them. Create your own character. To me, it's more like our president pointing to the only black man in the crowd and saying, "There's my African American," which, by the way, he did, as you know. It's almost insulting to hold up one character as a token like a zoo specimen. Build your own character. With the change in showrunner, I'm hopeful things will improve. Thanks, Jim Kevins. Look, I've been railing against this show. I feel your pain. I think it's exactly what you said. And I don't disagree with you at all. At all. let's see. I keep getting back up here. Here we go. Omar 94, man. Omar 94. Hey Rob, since CinemaCon would be this week, I know, with new movies being shown, let me ask you a what-if type of scenario. What movies never made do you wish were made? There's many classics like Stanley Kubrick's Napoleon, which I would have loved to have seen, Paul Verhoeven's The Crusade, Guillermo del Toro's At the Mountains of Madness, Tim Burton's Superman Lives, and George Miller's Justice League Mortal. But I have three in particular I wish happened. Ridley Scott's The Train. Written by Jim Olds of Fight Club, it was described as Alien on a train, and Scott would have reunited with H.R. Giger after doing Alien. Claire Noto's The Tourist. Oh my God, I so wanted to see that movie made. Giger did artwork for it. It was described as a darker and sexier version of Men in Black. The Tourist was basically about aliens that would come down and ride people's bodies. Oh man, I wanted to see that movie so bad. Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, a Cecil B. DeMille-sized epic about a master architect trying to create a utopian city of the future. Coppola announced he was making it a year or so ago after wanting to make it for years, but with COVID-19 happening, I don't think it'll get made. What about you? What do you wish got made? Thanks. Live long and prosper. Well, you know what, Omar94? I'm going to give you a very self-serving answer. I really wish that we had made Free Enterprise The Wrath of Shatner. For me, you know, it would have been 10 years after I made my first film. It's now been 10 years since we were going to make it. I haven't directed a feature film since, and I, again, wrote that script with Mark Altman, and we could still make it, by the way. We could still make it. I think it would have been great, and knowing what I know now, I think it would have been a much better movie than what I made 21 years ago. And, yeah, I would have liked to have made that. I really liked the script. I thought what we had going on there was really funny and really interesting, and we finally had the audience for it that we didn't have back in the day because the internet isn't what it is now. So, yeah, I really would have liked to have seen that happen. This one comes from the Waspinator. Step on up, smuggler. Let's get some dealing done. Good morning, Robba Ding Dong. It's your old pal, King Waspinator here. I'm listening to Sunday's episode, number 376, while I'm writing this. I was mulling over writing about some feelings of mine about the impact of Revenge of the Nerds, both positive and negative, but after hearing you read that article from the Way Back Machine, I thought I'd chime in on the subject of whether or not the fan community are a bunch of arrogant cretins. A sentiment I wouldn't disagree with, despite myself being very much a part of said tribe. I'd like to tell you about the time I completely dropped nerd culture for over 5 years. I've spoken before about being raised on Star Trek, but that is just the tip of the iceberg. Star Wars, The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings novels, Mel Brooks movies, the original Mad Max trilogy, David Lynch's Dune, all had a heavy presence in my childhood imagination. I got into tabletop role-playing around the age of 10, starting off with BattleTech and MechWarrior, and leading on to game series such as Rifts and the infamous World of Darkness games. I once won a Best Karaoke Award at a vampire convention in San Antonio, and Mike Pondsmith, the man behind Cyberpunk 2020, totally ripped me off for my Cybergen live-action concept as soon as he found out I was only 17 at the time we spoke. When I was 19 and working at the Highland 10 Theater in Austin, Texas, I attended a Magic the Gathering competition at a local comic shop. I didn't do terrible, didn't do great. I made it through a few rounds before I was eliminated, but after that event, I went home and ditched all my comics, all my Magic cards, sold my role-playing game collection, and pretty much stopped watching sci-fi and fantasy for several years after that. I didn't even bother going to see the first X-Men or Fellowship of the Ring movie when it was in the theaters, despite how big of a fan I was of both properties. I turned my back on virtually all of my childhood passions for the next 5 years. It was Deep Space Nine and TNG reruns on the Spike Channel network that slowly rehabilitated the nerd within. But even then, I didn't crack open a role-playing book until I hit my 30s, and to this day have not gone to any manner of convention or competitive event. And why? What happened at that Magic the Gathering tournament that caused such an extreme reaction? It was nerds, man. Effing nerds. Not a single person I faced on that night had even an ounce of good sportsmanship. Either they were sore losers or sore winners. If there was any middle ground to be had, I think I alone occupied it. It brought into focus years of constant nitpicky one-upsmanship I'd experienced and participated in, and I wanted nothing more to do with it. And to be frankly honest, after years of being a YouTube viewer and a smaller number of years experimenting with being a wannabe YouTube creator, I have days where the temptation to unplug from all of it again is very strong. Your channel and the little community I've come across, the little community I've come to know who lives in your YouTube live chats, is honestly the only place on YouTube that I find remotely welcoming. I can only imagine it has taken your mods a good bit of effort to curate it all to keep it that way. The last time I tried to engage with one of YouTube's little communities was with a channel whose name I will withhold. One of his primary revenue contributors, whom I suspect didn't like that I got as much engagement as I did without ever sending a super chat, called me the R word. While Mecha Random was in the chat with us, and the creator in question, not wanting to call out his top contributor, of course, instead agreed with him, which pissed me off to no end. I almost did quit YouTube over that. Barely made any videos for a good year, actually. The thing is, while there are aspects of the fan community that I would describe as toxic, I try and be sympathetic about it all because I'm one too, an arrogant cretin, which is why I would stress once more how singularly wholesome your little community here on YouTube is. I am, in many ways, rather surprised and touched that I have been accepted as much as I have, because I have said before, I'm just a doofus with little in the way to contribute. I mostly just talk about myself. But I do have my moments. And I wanted you to know personally how much I thank you for truly caring and paying attention to your audience. Never stop being you. There's just one thing you got to know. You got 10,000 more miles to go. Because you're one of the living. And if we can't stick together, you're one of the living. Who's going to make it tonight? Yeah, ho. Man, I got to watch that video now. Because you're one of the living. I love that. So good. Well, first of all, King Waspinator, the once and future King Waspinator, again, thank you for the kind words. But I have to say something. I didn't create this community. You know, yes, I have moderators. That was something early on that happened. But this community sort of created itself. You know, when I started doing these shows, people came, I guess it was a case of if you built it, they will come. Like, I didn't know. People had asked me, John Schnepp said I should do my own YouTube show. He's like, you're always smiling. You're always excited about something. You should do a YouTube show. I was like, I don't know, you know what? Because everybody who did YouTube shows, I was on Collider, and they had producers and the graphics, and it was also produced. And I was like, I can't, you know, I'd want, like, now is more my speed. There's lower thirds, there's some kind of graphic work, and I'm like, I don't know, you know. And then Elizabeth was like, no, do a YouTube show, and I didn't know. In order to even get monetized on YouTube, it's not something, you can't just turn on a camera and get monetized so people can send you super chats or whatever. You have to have 4,000 hours of views. 4,000 hours of views. And you have to have 1,000 subscribers. And I'm like, I didn't even know if anybody would subscribe to me because I was already on YouTube. And I just, you know, started talking in our laundry room. I never had the background I wanted. You know, I wanted to be in the Robservatory, which I was going to have to go make, you know, and it was going to take a lot of work. And I just was so busy I didn't have time. But people started to come. People will come, Ray. People will definitely come. And like, even like, I didn't know Detective Jim before I started doing this channel. And, you know, people started to come and stayed. You know, it was kind of like, I like to think that this is the record store in high fidelity, except having just two people. I'm John Cusack sitting in this place of stuff that I love. I'm a vinyl addict, you know, and I love the music. And I wanted to open a record store. And instead of just having two people, you all have come, but I'm your employee. Like, I work for all of you. And I appreciate you saying that. I mean, look, I think the community that we have here, the Post-Geek Singularity community, and you imagination, like, you know, I just made up the term imagination connoisseurs. And I thought that was cool. I thought, like, I'm going to call you all imagination connoisseurs because it's fun. You know, and being an imagination, I'm an imagination connoisseur, so I thought it would be fun. So, you know, To me, look, I can sit here and bitch and moan and complain about Star Trek. But here's the thing. We live in a world where we were born in the 20th or 21st century, depending on how old you are. I was born in the 20th century. I was very lucky to be born in the 20th century, the latter half of the 20th century. I was lucky to be born, even though I was adopted, that I was this close to non-existence. My mother chose not to have me aborted. By the way, I'm all pro-choice, 100%, just want to say that. But I found out how close. My mother put me up for adoption. I was adopted into a great family, and I grew up in a fairly upper middle class to upper middle class environment with good education. I was privileged all the way down the line. And I realized that bitching and moaning and complaining about a TV show is the height of being privileged. I mean, what if you were born 500 years ago? But, and I recognize that. And I think we all should recognize that. No matter how bad things, I used to tell people when people would tell me that they were feeling down, or they would even mention, I remember in junior high school and high school, there were a couple times I heard people who talked about killing themselves, and they would come to me, people would come to me a lot of the time when that would happen. And I would say, and I didn't mean this glibly or anything, I'd say, you can't do that. Because there's the latest, I would say, Star Trek movie or the Back to the Future. There's some movie I hadn't seen. And don't you want to stick around and see that movie? And I would use that as a metaphor to get into a larger discussion of there's so much, like we're all going to die someday, sooner rather than later sometimes. But don't you want to experience as much as possible while you're here? And I always thought that, there's such an interesting world out there that a change of scenery. I know when you're a teenager, you're stuck at home and all these things. But like here, we choose to be here. And I've chosen to do this show, and I've chosen ultimately, I am excited about all this stuff. And I can bitch and moan about Star Trek and complain about it because I've been watching it since I was 5. And I work now in the industry, and I know a lot of TV writers. I know a lot of really good TV writers. And I know, so I bitch and moan about Star Trek because I know it can be better. It's just like my parents. You'd come home and I'd have, like, if I brought home a 2.8 out of a 4-point system, 2.8. If I had come home with credit cards with a report card that was a 2.8, not enough A's, too many B's, maybe a few C's, my parents would just look at me and they'd be disappointed. And they'd be like, they were not helicopter parents. They're like, why do you have such a shitty report card? I mean, my parents, 3.3 was like, I was never a 4.0 student, but 3.3 was the bottom threshold of what they would accept. That was fine. And it was always my fault. They're like, do better. You can do better. And they put it on me. They're like, do better. I'm like, yes, I got to do better. And so when I talk about Star Trek, I want it to be good. I have not loved Star Trek. I wrote an article with my friend Dave Hargrove for Sci-Fi Universe magazine, why Star Trek First Contact is the worst Star Trek movie. The article was called Worst Contact. Now, a lot of it was flippant and glib, because I felt when Star Trek First Contact came out, I'm like, they already dealt with all of this within the context of the Next Generation series, and they're doing it. It's so dumbed down, and it's in such a rudimentary fashion. And the whole idea the Borg's plan was dumb, and that was not Zefram Cochrane. I have not Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Discovery is not my first rodeo bashing Star Trek. But that's why I think with all of Star Trek behind us, the fact that we're not getting, as you pointed out, or as other people pointed out, we should be getting Tiffany's Star Trek. We should be getting the best Star Trek of all, because television writing is arguably the best it's ever been. I mean, you could make that argument. And we've got more money to make Star Trek shows than has ever been. But the people that are writing this at the top, they want to turn Star Trek into something that they like rather than honor. I mean, they pay lip service. Yes, there's a long history of Star Trek. We're honoring Gene's vision. Nah, you're really not. What you want to do is make your own show, so you get in. That's what J.J. Abrams wanted to do with Star Trek from the beginning. They made no bones about that. They wanted to take over Star Trek. They want to make movies. They want to make television. They want to have all the merchandising. They wanted all of that. Video games. It didn't work out for them because they weren't willing to work within those boxes. The Kelvin movies, none of them were wildly successful. None of them were. You might throw box office numbers at me. Yeah, if you want to look at a box office number, this movie made $500 million. But how much did it cost? Well, it didn't make five, but the amount of money it cost, it was not successful. Star Trek, the modern era of Star Trek, since 2009, has been an attempt to keep a brand going. And that brand should be successful, but it's not. And that's the funny thing about it. They keep it going. They keep it going. Now we're going to have an animated comedy show. I know people working on that show. People I respect. And I hope it's good. I want them to do great work. I want every Star Trek episode to be great. And just like I want our community, there's no reason why you King Waspinator should not be welcome here. I mean, I want this if this is a personality, this whole thing is an extension of my personality. I'm always like, hey man, let's go do this. Even in high school, I'm like, let's go paint a mural on the wall. Let's not paint it on that wall. Let's go paint it on that wall and let's go make it cool. And we did. Got a great bunch of people. I mean, I was the person that actually said, let's paint it on that wall. And people are like, can we do that? I'm like, yes, we can. Because I knew it was going to be great. Our Fantasia mural was going to be great. You know why? Because I had really good people working on it, and I knew they would make a kick-ass thing. I fucked up the Death Star, and our own moderator, Greg Smith, came in and fixed it. Because I'm not an artist. He's a much better artist than me. I just thought it'd be cool to try and paint the Death Star. It was bad. Greg Smith fixed it. I had no problem. This is not good. Fix it, Greg. Now he's a moderator. But, I appreciate you saying it. This is a good community because of you people. Because of you imagination connoisseurs, you members of the Post-Geek Singularity. You make this community good. Now, the moderators are great to have here because people are always going to, you always have those hit-and-run people or people that are going to say bad shit. And I hate that. But, even Mark C., who's been a long-time participant in this, Mark C. has written thoughtful, nice letters. He's got a lot of interesting things to say. He interacts in the chats. He sent me another super chat. Getting back to comics, when nobody batted an eye when comic shop giant Meltdown Comics closed and didn't ask why, the industry was doomed. Yeah, for those of you who don't know, Meltdown Comics, which is on Sunset Boulevard, man, I loved Meltdown Comics. I love As a matter of fact, one of my favorite things that I own, which is right over there, I was able to get at Meltdown Comics. I'll tell you what it is. You're going to be like, what is it, Rob? What is it? What is your... So there is, I mentioned it earlier on John Campia's show, there was, maybe, I don't know if they're still doing it. There was a Japanese company called Alfrex that made samurai, 6-scale samurai figures. They made Lone Wolf and Cub. They made Zatoichi. And what I really wanted from them was they made a box set of all 7 samurai. And it was $1,500. And even I was doing well. I was doing really, really well. It was back when Ludovico I was cranking out, working on these big projects. But even I was like, man, I couldn't. But they had things at Meltdown on consignment. And one day I walked in there, and they had that Alfrex set new in the box, half price, $750. Somebody was trying to get rid of it, and I'm like, I mean, I went, I put it behind the counter. I said, I will be back. I didn't even know if I had enough money in my bank account. Even if I didn't, I would have figured out a way. And I went and got that from Meltdown. I bought it. It's right over there. The box is there in the box. I had them in my office when I was doing Star Trek. I love them. They're so great. As a matter of fact, when I was still married, I had our Japanese neighbor who could read Japanese. The figures weren't dressed. They had to be dressed and tied. Everything had to be tied traditionally and all that. So I actually had a girl, my Japanese neighbor, dress them. She was like, you want me to dress these dolls? And I'm like, I can't read Japanese. I don't know how to do this. And she did. I know that's an aside. But that's, you know what? I think people come here because I'm that kind of guy. I will buy the 7 Samurai. And I also have a Yojimbo figure too. And I will make my Japanese neighbor who speaks fluent Japanese, who is from Japan, dress my dolls for me. And I'm not making that up. And I want our community to be that way forever. So King Waspinator, I'm glad you feel that you can be here. But that's also, Mark C., why I like everybody here. Everybody here has made this great community. And, you know, if you set a good tone, you people, I know, half the time you're not even paying attention to what I'm saying. I sometimes go back and read the chats, and you guys are talking about pizza, and I'm like, I would have... and pancakes and waffles, and I'm like, man, why wasn't I in on that conversation? I could have been in on that conversation. I miss those days, and but it has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But that's okay, because I would love it to once again, like, I'll just look over. Anthony Choice says, King Waspinator, an example of a self-published game I know with shades of Divinity and Shadows of Night. Don't look for funding. Do it for you. Initially, think of it as a sacrifice to break in. See, that's cool. You guys are having a whole conversation about tabletop gaming. I love that, which I think is great. So, yeah, I'm still Chris Cocking's idea about doing a bedtime story about an episode. Hilarious. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I actually have to go to my other job, which is work on these special features. We got to deliver them for the Hills Run Red. I got through a lot of letters, but not all of them. There's still a lot more letters, and we're gonna find out about these videos, these pop videos. We'll see if I can play them. So, Luke, don't fret, sir. You'll get these videos played at some point. I want to say thank you for everyone for being the great audience that you are, for being the imagination connoisseurs that you are, and sending me letters and hanging out with me and supporting the channel in all the ways that you do, whether it's tips or super chats or sending me these letters, which some of you take a long time writing these letters, which I think it's amazing. I'm so flattered, because one of my favorite things in comic books when I was growing up was reading the letters of comment, the locks. I love that. And it's great. I mean, there's a guy named Frank Balkin who's worked his way up in the industry that I remembered from, the letters of comment in my favorite comics in the 80s. He's in Hollywood now. Pretty cool. So I want to thank you for those letters and for keeping going in this time. We'll see where we're going. Hopefully things will change soon. I want to make sure that Jacob Fudge's comic book store gets put on a paying basis again and all of that. Let's hope everything comes back, and movies, it's going to be really interesting to see where we're going to go in the 2020s. It's such an interesting way to start out this decade, even though I know I've said 2020 is not the first year of the 2020s, even though people would say it's the last year of the teens, but okay. You know my thoughts on that. So anyway, I just want to thank you all for being here. I will be on the John Campea show tomorrow. I will be back tomorrow in the afternoon. By the way, yes, I'm going to, for the very first time in my life with Elizabeth tonight, I'm going to watch The Sound of Music, a movie I've never seen. Tonight is the night, ladies and gentlemen. I think we're going to watch it on Disney+. Sound of Music. We're going to watch it, and tomorrow's Elizabeth's whining about movies will be about The Sound of Music. And I'm not going to say anything about it until whining about movies, so I'm not going to say anything on the John Campea show or today or on the Robservations tomorrow. But anyway, I also want to thank my moderating staff, Mike Bond, for sending me today's letters. I want to thank, of course, Detective Jim for being Detective Jim. Jim Boyers is just like a cool name. Detective Jim Boyers. That must have been really cool because it sounds like such a detective name. I want to thank Greg Smith, and I want to thank Lewis Hugh and Jordy Lyons for being great moderators. And Lewis Hugh comes in. I want to thank him also for coming into whining about movies. Appreciate that, Lewis. And I'm going to bring an end to Robservations episode number 378. I was talking with Elizabeth about doing a 400-minute show, like going on for 8 hours. And at first, everyone's laughing. And the more I thought about it, the more appealing I found that if I could get guests and people to pop in, from all over the place, because we're 3 weeks away. 3 weeks away from the 400th episode. And if we're still all, I know that the shelter-in-place order in LA it's until April 19th. So it'd be maybe the day after, or if it continues on, I suspect it will. But 8 hours just to see if I could do it. Could be really funny. Like I could just have people show up here. Who knows? Who knows what I do for the 400? But I'm sure it'll be a barn burner. We'll see what we can do. I mean, it would be really interesting to invite people from every time zone. Just keep going. But anyway, so brings this an end to Robservations episode number 378. And remember, every person you meet, I don't even know where I'm at here. I haven't even looked. I'm so like, hang on. Let me switch angles. Because I can. I like this angle. Remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear. And all you have to do is listen. And do we think King Waspinator should get back into tabletop gaming? Well, it's up really for him to decide, but I would hope so. Nerds, man. I have a lot to say about it, but yeah, nerd communities can be, it's funny, they can be helpful and hurtful at the same time. So I feel King Waspinator's pain, actually. I do feel your pain. And one day I have to do a show on that. But remember, it is our tribe. Everyone, I'm bringing an end to this. I'm actually tired. I'm like, what am I saying? I'm so loopy. Have a better day, and I'll see you tomorrow. I hope.